Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Board of Supervisors meeting of December 1st, 2015. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Thank you, Madam President. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos present. President Breed.
Here.
Breed present. Supervisor Campos.
Present.
Campos present. Supervisor Christensen.
Present.
Christensen present. Supervisor Cohen.
Present, thank you.
Cohen present. Supervisor Farrell. Farrell present. Supervisor Kim. Kim not present. Supervisor Marr.
Here.
Marr present. Supervisor Tang.
Present.
Tang present. Supervisor Wiener. Wiener present. Supervisor Yee.
Present.
Yee present. Madam President, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, can you please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Clerk, are there any communications?
I have no communications, Madam President.
Colleagues, are there any changes to the October 20th board meeting minutes? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve those minutes? Motioned by Supervisor Campos, seconded by Supervisor Christensen. Colleagues, can we take that without objection? Without objection, those meeting minutes will pass after public comment. All right, Madam Clerk, can you please call the first item?
Continued from the November 17th board meeting, the first item of business is the appearance by the Honorable Mayor Edwin Lee. There being no questions submitted on November 17th, the Mayor may address the board for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you. Welcome, Mayor Ed Lee.
Thank you, President Breed and supervisors, and thank you to the audience, our residents, and those that have come to this meeting. Let me just apologize for the delay. I got the flu, so this is a make-up time, and I'm appreciative of it. Last time we met in these chambers, the voters of San Francisco since then passed the largest affordable housing bond in our city's history, and I'm so gratified to have worked with the board, all of you, on this, because in many ways it was very historic. And I want to just indicate my sincere appreciation for working together on this. There is a housing crisis, and we are all serious about getting work done in this manner. And I look forward to working with you on a number of items, but certainly implementing this $310 million affordable housing bond. That's part of our over $1.3, $1.5 billion investment that makes our city more affordable, and certainly building and rehabbing low and middle income housing for our families is truly important on everybody's agenda. It'll also help us deliver on a commitment that I've made to deliver at least 30,000 new homes by 2020, with over half of that available to middle and low-income families. And it'll certainly help us with the commitment and the important work of fixing our public housing for our lowest income San Francisco residents. And as we talk about creating housing faster, we also need to talk about the private sector that can help us build more affordable housing, especially in a strong economy like ours, and especially on large projects. Today, I have already announced that we'll bring to the voters sometime next year a charter amendment that will require housing developers to build more affordable housing in their new developments. We'll reconvene what I think you'll agree with me. It was a very workable housing working group that had been part of our success in 2012 in the $1.3 billion Housing Trust Fund that was passed with the then Proposition C. And I will direct this working group that includes not only that original group, but members of our housing development community, nonprofit community, as well as developers who helped us pass this recent housing bond, and direct them to create a plan that increases our affordable housing requirements in new developments, especially in large developments. We will simultaneously need to consider how to speed up construction. I know the cost of constructing housing is very expensive in the city, but we need to work alongside this challenge as well to provide housing investors with even more certainty. So our housing working group will consider process improvements as well as shorten the time frame for building needed affordable housing projects in our city. And when it comes to affordable housing policy and certainly homeless policies for that matter, I know that when we work together, and we will make great progress. So this Thursday, I intend to lay out an ambitious plan for our city, a vision for addressing homelessness, working with this board and with our nonprofits, with our housing providers, and in the private sector. And I look forward to working with all of you on this challenge. Let me take this opportunity to give a special thanks to one of your colleagues and one that I had the privilege of appointing to the board, Supervisor Christensen. I just want to personally thank you for someone who has worked in the community for those years advocating for parks and neighborhood centers and transportation and taking up the privilege of being a supervisor for District 3. I personally want to thank you for your attention to your colleagues' needs, being a good member of the board, and representing District 3 so well. Let me just say personally thank you for that sacrifice. And I know that you want to continue in your public sector, so I'll take the opportunity to thank you now for this sacrifice you did and look forward to working with you in the very near future. Thank you, Supervisor Christensen. As you all probably know, too, today is World AIDS Day. Remember those that have been lost to this terrible epidemic. I know this is near and dear to each member of the Board of Supervisors. And we are providing hope for those living with HIV and AIDS, and I look forward to a generation that will be AIDS-free. Not only will City Hall this evening be drenched in the red lining to symbolize our commitment to end HIV and AIDS, we're going to redouble that effort to get to zero infections. And we will do so with some tremendous boost. As you've heard within the last 48 hours, a $20 million grant to UC San Francisco that I know we're smiling at because investing in San Francisco's approach with the great institution of UCSF and its Institute to Cure AIDS is a wonderful another acknowledgement that we're getting closer and closer to the final answer and solution. We are a national leader in the treatment, in the housing, and the care for people living with AIDS. We will never abandon that with our community partners, and we remain committed to providing the hope and the cure and one day bringing an end to this epidemic. Finally, I want to acknowledge another mayor in the chambers with us today. I'd like to recognize Mila, the newest dog mayor for a day, and the runner-up, Deputy Mayor Luca, two greyhounds who have won our hearts and our votes. They've spent the day visiting city landmarks and have considered important dog-friendly legislation. They ran campaigns worthy of their dignified species with platforms for fewer nail trims, longer naps, more outdoor romps, and belly rubs when required. The nonprofit Friends of Animal Care and Control selected these two qualified dogs as potential future mayors for a day at the Animal Care and Control's 25th anniversary gala in 2014. Mila and Luca's guardian and chief of staff, Teresa King, won the live auction item. So she's there with our friendly dogs. Funds raised for the auction support our Animal Care and Control, and I want to thank them for their support. Thank you for being here. And now it's on to my belly rub and work for the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for being here today. All right, Madam Clerk, will you please read the consent agenda?
Items 1 through 9 comprise the matters on consent. These items are routine. If a member objects, an item may be removed and considered separately.
All right, seeing no names on the roster, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
On items 1 through 9, Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos. Campos, aye. Supervisor Christensen.
Aye.
Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell?
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim? Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr?
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang?
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener?
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee?
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos? Supervisor Avalos on the consent agenda. Avalos, aye. There are 11 ayes.
These items are approved, adopted, and passed on the first reading unanimously. Madam Clerk, please call items 10, 11, and 12 together.
Item 10 is the ordinance to amend the city's general plan by amending the following maps and figures within the downtown plan. Map 1 to reclassify certain lots and block numbers, amending Map 5 to reclassify the height and bulk limits in accordance with the 5th and Mission Special Use District and sectional map HT001. And amending figures 2, 3, and 4 to refer to the 5th and Mission Special Use District, amending maps 4 and 5 of the urban design element to refer to the 5th and Mission Special Use District, amending maps 2, 3, 5, and 7 of the South of Market Area Plan to remove various lots in Assessor's Block Number 3725 from the boundaries of the South of Market Area Plan, adopting the appropriate findings. Item 11 is an ordinance to amend the Planning Code to create the 5th and Mission Special Use District, amending various zoning sectional maps to reflect the 5th and Mission Special Use District, to make environmental and other appropriate findings, including a statement of overriding considerations. And item 12, an ordinance to approve a development agreement between the city and the 5M project containing various public benefits, including a minimum percentage of affordable housing, approving the use of impact fees and exactions for affordable housing and other community benefits as set forth in the development agreement.
Roll call vote.
On items 10, 11, and 12, Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos?
No.
Campos, no. Supervisor Christensen?
Aye.
Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen?
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell?
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim?
Aye.
Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr?
No.
Marr, no. Supervisor Tang?
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener?
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee?
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos?
No.
Avalos, no. There are 8 ayes and 3 noes, with Supervisors Campos, Marr, and Avalos in the dissent.
Those ordinances are finally passed. Madam Clerk, please read item number 13.
Item 13, ordinance to amend the administrative code to clarify existing preferences in allocating city affordable housing units. First, to certificate of preference holders, and second, to tenants evicted under the Ellis Act, to expand the second category of preference for eligible tenants displaced under the Ellis Act, to create a third preference for residents in the neighborhood where the affordable housing is located, to make conforming amendments to the provisions of the administrative and planning codes, and to affirm the planning department's CEQA determination and make other appropriate findings.
Roll call vote.
On item 13, Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos?
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Christensen?
Aye.
Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen?
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell? Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim? Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr?
No.
Marr, no. Supervisor Tang?
No.
Tang, no. Supervisor Wiener?
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee?
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos?
Aye.
Avalos, aye. There are 9 ayes and 2 noes, with Supervisors Marr and Tang in the dissent.
This ordinance is finally passed. Madam Clerk, please call items 14, 15, and 16 together.
Item 14 is a resolution to approve the award of a hotel management agreement and a cash management and lockbox agreement to Hyatt Corporation for a term of 10 years to commence following the opening of the hotel, with compensation not to exceed approximately $20 million relating to an on-airport hotel at the San Francisco International Airport, to approve the forms of the agreement and to authorize the execution and delivery, approving other certain related matters. Item 15, a resolution to approve the issuance of up to $243 million in aggregate principal amount of San Francisco Airport Commission capital plan bonds and $225 million in aggregate principal amount of San Francisco Airport Commission specialty facility bonds to finance a hotel, to authorize the execution and delivery of the agreements, and to approve certain related matters. Item 16, ordinance to appropriate approximately $473 million, consisting of proceeds from the sale of airport capital plan bonds and fund balance, proceeds from hotel specialty facility revenue bonds, and other long-term financing sources, to develop a hotel within the San Francisco International Airport, and placing that amount on controller's reserve pending receipt of the indebtedness and other financing sources.
Colleagues, can I have a motion to recuse Supervisor Farrell from the vote of this item? Motioned by Supervisor Marr, seconded by Supervisor Campos. Can we take this without objection? Without objection, the motion passes. Supervisor Marr.
Thank you, President Breed. Colleagues, as you might know, there was a discussion on this item at the Budget Committee. I had raised some questions about the process, but I wanted to thank John Martin, our airport director, for answering all of my questions. I wanted to thank the Fairmont and the Hyatt for engaging in the process. I still had some questions, but I'm putting my trust in the process that Mr. Martin and the airport used to select the management company that would be the one that will fill the new hotel for the airport. So it was a process where I had all of my questions answered, and I'm appreciative of Mr. Martin and his staff. Thank you. So I'm supportive of this now.
Thank you, Supervisor Marr. Supervisor Yee.
Thank you, Madam President. I just had a couple of quick questions since I was not on the Land Use Committee. These might be similar questions asked, but I wasn't sure. So there's been some discrepancy raised in terms of the process of how we define our hotels, and certainly I'm not an expert in what is considered a 3-star, 4-star, or whatever stars they assign to. But there's a question of whether you could have more than one 4-star within the proximity from the same management company, and whether or not the Hyatt that exists now near in Burlingame, I believe, how many stars that has versus what would be built at the airport. That's one question, and maybe just answer that could be a quick answer.
Sure, Supervisor. The Burlingame Hyatt is a...
Mr. Martin, can you please identify yourself?
Okay. John Martin, Airport Director. So the Burlingame Hyatt is a AAA 3-diamond hotel, and it has been a AAA 3-diamond hotel since 2007. We had a restriction in the RFP documents that we would not accept submissions from hotels that had a 4-diamond hotel within a 10-mile radius. But because the Burlingame Hyatt is a 3-diamond, they qualified. We sought proposals from them, from Marriott, from Starwood, from Hilton, all the big hotel operators around the airport that also have the 3-diamond rating, but we specifically said we were looking for a 4-diamond property on the airport.
The other question I had, and this was raised by people from the Fairmont, there's a report by the Cushman Wakefield that indicated that during downturns in the economy, that when you have two hotels right next to each other or close to each other, and one is bigger than the other, whether or not that's going to give motivation, I suppose, to pay less attention to the smaller one, meaning that in the downturn, they'll support the business going towards the other hotel, in this case, not the one in the airport. So that's sort of the gist of this report. I mean, do you have any comments around that?
Sure. At the bottom line, the report is meaningless because it ignores the fact that we negotiated a 35% room rate differential between the Burlingame property and the airport property. If we don't receive at least 35% more on average per room night, Hyatt loses their management contract. It's curious they ignored that key fact in their analysis. The analysis was prepared in November. It's been public information for some period of time that we negotiated that 35% differential. The experience at Dallas is noteworthy. Dallas Airport has both a Hyatt Regency and a Grand Hyatt on airport property. They've been very successful financially. In the economic downturn, 2009, the room rate differential for the airport Grand Hyatt actually increased relative to other airports, other hotels in the airport area. So we know our property will have a higher average room night stay than properties surrounding the airport. we actually anticipate that in an economic downturn, that differential may well increase to our advantage. So that's been the experience at Dallas.
Okay. Thank you for your answer. That clarifies some of my questions.
Thank you, Supervisor Yee. Supervisor Campos.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I want to thank the airport director for being willing to have a conversation about this item. And I wanted to just do a brief follow-up on the question that Supervisor Yee raised, and I believe that, in fact, I know that issue was also raised in committee. But specifically, going back to the question of whether or not the other Hyatt hotel in the vicinity to the airport is a 4-star or 4-diamond. The reason why that's relevant, just so that people who may not be aware of the specifics know, is that to the extent that the cities, I guess, take, if you will, from the proceeds is dependent on the success of the airport hotel. If you have another similar property that is competing for the same clientele, then there's an argument that the hotel that we're talking about would not be as successful, which means less money for the city. That's why this is so relevant. So I appreciate what you said, and I wanted to just more specifically ask. I saw a couple of things, including information on the website that seems, at least at the time that this was printed, seemed to be the website for the Hyatt Regency in Burlingame that showed that it was a 4-diamond. I have seen, some evidence that at least some of the personnel at that property identifies the property as a 4-star. And so I just want to go back. What is your response to any, concern or intimation that we might be getting ourselves into a relationship with a company that has a very similar property that would be competing with this?
Supervisor, the bottom line protection that I negotiated, and I was prepared to walk away from the deal, actually walked away from negotiations over this issue, that we demanded a high differential requirement, and we obtained that commitment for that 35% room rate differential. And while Hyatt intends to keep the Burlingame properties a 3-diamond, even if it should later become a 4-diamond if AAA upgrades it, that 35% provides the airport with the protection we need. The airport properties around the country do command a premium, so that's why they were willing to agree to the 35% differential. Hyatt as well has about 8 times as many members in its frequent guest program as Fairmont, so that provides a level of protection as well for us to have that big of a draw. I think I may have missed one part of your question.
I think that addresses it, and just I'm not an expert in any of these things, so I want to just make sure that I understand. And I have a lot of respect for the director and the work that he and his staff do. So from your perspective, that 35% differentiation in terms of pricing is more important in terms of ensuring the viability and the success of the hotel at the airport than any designation.
That's the most important thing, and that to me was the deal breaker, that I was willing to walk away from the deal if I didn't get that guarantee. The other point, Supervisor, I meant to make was on the diamonds and star ratings. The diamond rating is from AAA, and there's a star rating, I think it's referred to as a star rating from Forbes, used to be the mobile rating. And there's a lot of confusion among the public, probably even in the industry, on what is a star rating versus a diamond rating. And even as recently as 2 weeks ago, when I was before the Finance Committee, I popped up the Fairmont in Seattle, and someone else's website, not Fairmont's, was showing it as a 4-diamond hotel, or 5-diamond hotel, when in fact it's been now evaluated as a 4-diamond property. So a lot of old information that's on the internet that all of us are always trying to track down and keep up to date.
Just a final question, given the importance of the 35% differentiation, how do you, going forward, how do you monitor to make sure that there's compliance with that requirement?
We receive an annual certification from Hyatt's auditor on the average room rate at the other property. As well, we can check the San Mateo County tax records because they have to report their gross revenues to San Mateo County as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Campos. Director Martin, I had a question regarding the process. Information has been provided to me that indicates, or there have been comments made by individuals that suggested that the Hyatt, when they bid on this project, they were actually, in fact, a Four Diamond, which was basically, and I know there have been a lot of questions asked along these same lines, but I just want to make sure that, for the record, it's clear that when they bid on this process, there was a process that determined and checked to ensure that they weren't actually a Four Diamond hotel within that proximity in order to allow them to move forward in the bidding process. Is that correct?
That is correct. They've been a Three Diamond hotel since 2008.
And how did you make that determination? Because again, there are a lot of different references, and you were able to research and make that determination clearly.
That's right. We have a hotel project manager on our staff, as well as consulting firms, Jones, Lang, and LaSalle, who has the expertise in the hotel industry, and they researched and confirmed that information.
Okay, thank you. All right, Supervisor Christensen.
Maybe going over some of the same grounds, but so we've talked a lot about the Diamond and Star ratings, but there are a number of chains in the area proximate to the hotel. All of them were invited to participate in the RFP. That indicates then that co-management of hotels on and off the airport grounds within a close proximity is not considered an issue. Like if you've got a 600-room Hyatt off the airport grounds and a planned 250 or 300-room hotel on the grounds, the airport is not concerned that Hyatt will manage those two properties to their own advantage as opposed to the singular advantage of the hotel property. You mentioned Dallas, for example. Both of those hotels are on the DFW property, so whatever happens, presumably DFW wins. But in this case, the star rating, the level of hotel really is significant enough that there's no concern about that co-management on and off grounds?
With that 35% room rate differential, there is no concern. Without that, I would not be recommending it. We did want the big hotel operators that have very large bases of frequent guests in their programs, travelers who go right to that website, the Marriott or the Hyatt website, as their first hotel choice. So it's a real plus to have that kind of a base to draw from. But even if we had selected Marriott or or Starwood, if they had scored number one, we would have negotiated the same requirement of a room rate differential to protect the airport and the city's interests.
So that presumes then that the hotel operator would rather have people at a higher rate regardless of the size of the hotel or the size of the operation.
They want to be successful with both hotels, and they're really fairly distinct markets. What people are willing to pay for the convenience of being right on airport property commands a significant premium.
Mm-hmm. And just one more question. So the 35% differential remains. Is there anything, any restriction that governs the designation of the hotel? Are we guaranteed in some way of getting a Grand Hyatt at the airport as opposed to a Hyatt Regency off-site?
We're guaranteed of getting a Grand Hyatt, and that the 4-star plus at least four diamond rating will be maintained during the term of the agreement.
And the agreement precludes them upgrading the Burlingame facility during the term of this contract to a 4-diamond hotel?
They have confirmed that they do not intend to upgrade it to that, but because the rating comes from AAA and not from them, they can't, it's not under their direct control to prevent that from happening, and that's why that room rate differential was so key to me.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. There are still some questions and concerns that I also have, but it is now 2:30, and so before we continue with this item, we are going to be moving to our 2:30 commendations. And so at this time, we will start with Supervisor Tang.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. President Breed, if you would like, you can continue with the item first before the commendation.
Okay. Supervisor Tang, we need some time on this item before we continue.
All right, then. Okay, thank you. So, as Mayor Lee mentioned earlier today, colleagues, we do have another mayor in our chamber today, and so I'm very pleased and honored to welcome Mila King to our board. We all know that there were some heated races in the election a month ago, but maybe some of you didn't know that there was another intense race going on, and that was the race to become the dog mayor for a day in San Francisco. So after some rough campaigning, I am excited to announce today the newly elected dog mayor of San Francisco, who has joined us in the chamber today, Mila King. And voters were very inspired by Mila's story of being a retired athlete and a single mother of 11 children. It was a close race, though, and so today I'm also excited to announce that we also have a newly elected deputy mayor, Luca King. And so as you can tell from the last name, they are from the same family, and their proud guardians, Teresa and Norm King, are here with us in the chamber today. If you'd like to please stand. I'm sure that Teresa and Norm are very proud of Mila and Luca for their accomplishments. Mila and Luca are really great examples of just how much rescue animals add to our lives. And so we really wanted to take this opportunity to thank people like Teresa and Norm for supporting and advocating for all rescue animals through Friends of Animal Care Control. And, of course, for our own animal shelter, and I know Virginia Donahue from ACC, our director, is here today. They are an incredible department, and they take in any animal in any condition, and they're the only organization in San Francisco, public or private, that does so. They even take animals that are considered unadoptable by other organizations, such as pit bull terriers and rats. And what also makes ACC so unique is that not only can you adopt cats and dogs, but you can also adopt birds, reptiles, rabbits, guinea pigs, and almost any other domesticated animal you can imagine. ACC also serves a major public safety function in our city. Animal care control officers respond to calls from the public, and calls range from helping to transport injured wildlife to rehab centers to rescuing animals from dangerous situations. So really, this was today, I think, a wonderful opportunity to thank Animal Care Control for all their work. It is the place where my family first adopted our family dog, a Maltese. And so I also wanted to thank Jane Tobin, who's here. She's worked for so many years with the Friends of ACC. And it was through the 25th anniversary gala that she helped organize that Teresa and Norm are the proud parents now of the dog mayor of San Francisco today. Some of Mila's kitten constituents are also here today as part of our office's third annual 12 Days of Kitten event that started December 1st. So our office is hosting adoptable kittens from ACC until December 11th, and we will be open during our office hours for people to stop by and to get some kitten playtime to de-stress from work and support Friends of ACC. And so our office is happy to turn City Hall until December 11th into Kitty Hall. And we're very happy to have Mayor Mila and Deputy Mayor Luca here to kick off the festivities. So with that, I don't know if Teresa and Norm would like to say a few words, but welcome and thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much. Ma'am, could you please come over to the podium?
I wanted to thank you very, very much for the honor, both Mayor Mila and Deputy Mayor Luca are very honored, and they're looking forward to really working towards helping animal care control and bettering the lives of animals around the city and beyond. Both Luca and Mila are rescue greyhounds, and so that's another important area in the lives of taking care of rescued animals. And thank you very, very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you and congratulations. Now I'd like to recognize Supervisor Campos for our next 2:30 commendation.
Don't worry, I'm not going to make any jokes about our two mayors, but they are very well behaved. It is my honor today to recognize a pretty amazing group of women. If you will remember, I introduced in this Board of Supervisors pass the first of its kind equal pay ordinance at the end of 2014. That law requires contractors and subcontractors that do business on large projects with the city to submit an equal pay report on compensation paid to employees, and it establishes an equal pay advisory board. This board has been meeting throughout the year to undertake a very difficult task, a task that actually no one else in this country, perhaps even the world, has actually done. And the task is to create a data collection system to analyze compensation rates for men and women, and for men and women of different races, that will set off a red flag if there is disparity. If that data indicates that men and women may be compensated differently for the same work that they're performing. We know that this happens all over the United States, that it happens all over the world. It's a pervasive problem that affects all of us, but especially women. Despite passage of the Equal Pay Act of 1963, more than 50 years ago, census data from 2011 shows that the average woman still earns 77 cents for every dollar earned by men. The pay gap is even greater for African American and Latina women, with African American women earning 64 cents on the dollar and Latina women earning 56 cents for every dollar earned by a Caucasian male. I am proud that we are seeking to do something about this here in San Francisco, and I am enormously proud and appreciative of the 7 members of the Equal Pay Advisory Board for creating something that can truly change not just San Francisco, but it can change this country, it could change the world. So with that in mind, I'd like to call upon the members of the board to please come up. And they are Utuma Belfray, Rachel Langston, Marissa Diaz, Dolores Blanding, Dilraj Kahai, Anu Menon, Margie English. I also would like to call on Mulayne Ahern to come forward. She is the staff person from the Human Rights Commission who has worked tirelessly with the advisory board to implement this legislation. Please come up to the podium. This amazing group of women will be releasing its final report in the next couple of weeks, and men. Stay tuned for more on that when we get to roll call. But I want to recognize every member of this board for the work that they are doing. I also want to thank Teresa Sparks from the Human Rights Commission for making this a priority. And again, to the staff that has been working with this group. And now I especially want to acknowledge Rachel Langston, who has served as the Equal Pay Advisory Board Chair, and who worked closely with Mulayne to plan and ensure that all meetings were productive. I know that Rachel is going to say a few words. But on behalf not only of the board and the district that I represent, but quite frankly, on future generations of San Francisco, especially all the girls, young women, and women who will be impacted by this work, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Campos. Again, my name is Rachel Langston. I'm the chair of the Equal Pay Advisory Board. I'd like to, of course, take a moment to thank Supervisor Campos and the rest of the Board of Supervisors for not only creating this board, but also for continuously supporting our efforts since our inception. Since our first meeting in April, we've had the opportunity to gather information from a variety of experts within and outside of the city, including individuals from the Department of the Status of Women, the Office of Labor Standards Enforcement, the City Attorney's Office, City Controller's Office, and City Department of Human Resources, to name only a few. We've also called upon outside experts from both public and private entities who have undertaken similar efforts to assess pay equity. Using the information we've gleaned from this vast array of experts, we've begun to develop a reporting system which will ensure that San Francisco will continue to set the bar for other cities throughout the state and the country, while minimizing the burden on reporting contractors. We are in the process of compiling our findings and recommendations, which, as Supervisor Campos noted, we hope to share with the board next month. I would be remiss to close before thanking the Human Rights Commission, and particularly Director Sparks and Melaine Ahern, who has staffed the advisory board, for their unwavering commitment and tireless support. Thank you all again, and we look forward to sharing our report with you in January.
Thank you all for your advocacy and congratulations. Now at this time, I want to return to our last item, items 14, 15, and 16. Before we move forward with our vote, I actually had a few more questions. More specifically, you have already been recused, Supervisor Farrell, so thank you for leaving. So I want to ask question of Director Martin more specifically about the 4-diamond rating, because I've received information that specifies that, and this is directly from the Hyatt at the airport, that their hotel is in fact a 4-diamond hotel. And can you explain to me, exactly, or someone from the Hyatt could probably explain, but it seems that, there's information out there that makes it clear to the public that this is a 4-diamond hotel, but there's something that your office did to verify that it is, in fact, a 3-diamond hotel. So could you just be clear about that explanation, because that's what I'm most concerned about.
Sure, and it was a very important criteria that be met. The AAA publishes the diamond rating for hotels on an annual basis. So
do you know when annually?
I don't, but I know since 2008, since 2007, actually, since 2007, the Burlingame property has been a 3-diamond hotel. And if you go to the Hyatt website, there's no question that the Burlingame property, if you go to make a reservation at the Hyatt Burlingame, that it is a 3-diamond. And so it has been that for 8 years. We have verified that. There's still maybe legacy information out there, just like if I request 5-diamond Hotel Seattle, there's a link to another site, not Fairmont. Fairmont pops up on the list. Go to the Fairmont site. it shows 5 stars, not 5 diamonds, so they're accurate. It's a little bit confusing, but one would think, if just an ordinary traveler, that the Fairmont in Seattle is a 5 diamond, but in fact it's a 4 diamond hotel. So there's a lot of confusing information out there. That's why it's so important that we follow the AAA published data, which we have followed and we have verified.
So, Mr. Martin, are you concerned that although according to the AAA rating, they're a 3 diamond, but their advertising in their sales department is, that they're a 4 diamond hotel? Are you concerned that they are misleading the public in their advertising in any way based on just the fact? I'm sure you've seen this information. I'm sure you know that this is information that's being put out there about this specific hotel. So I am just trying to reconcile why we would select a hotel that, although we know legally they're rated at 3-star, their advertising is basically it's false advertisement.
There's legacy information on the internet that it's difficult for all of us to track down. There's information on airline locations at SFO that show, if you look on other websites other than our own, that will pop up old pages for SFO with old information that's inaccurate. So any big organization faces this task of trying to track down inaccurate information from old links, old legacy information. In the end, my 35% differential is my guarantee. It's a guarantee for the airport, for the city, that even if this property becomes a 4 diamond property at a later date, we get the financial protection we need. I think
we get the financial protection we need, but what about the public and the advertisement to the public and what the hotel is supposed to provide to the public? Is that somehow protected in this agreement as well?
They are not to have on their sites misinformation. We will certainly hold them accountable if on their sites, and I would question whether that is accurate, and there is confusing information, as I mentioned, on Fairmont. Within the hotel industry, getting everything accurate, up to date, is an ongoing issue. But if you go to make a reservation at the Hyatt Burlingame, there's no question on their reservation system it is a 3 diamond property.
Okay, seeing no other names on the roster. Thank you for this clarification. I still, I will say that I'm still a little concerned. I know that this process was discussed in more detail in the Budget and Finance Committee meeting, and I know that there have been a number of issues that have come to my attention last minute, so this is why I've continued to bring those issues up. More specifically, I did have an opportunity to meet with your attorney who specifically worked on this agreement to ask a number of questions and was assured that the process was vetted. There was a lot of care taken in dealing with this particular process, and based on their work, based on your work, I know that you understand that these kinds of issues can be really problematic, especially when you have groups of individuals who you respect and you also trust bringing to your attention serious concerns. And unfortunately, I don't have a way to determine whether or not those concerns are valid or not based on how the information is presented. So at this time, I'm definitely willing to consider supporting this, but I am just hopeful that in the future that these kinds of issues will be that the department would be a little bit more proactive with members of the board and communicating with us before they get to the level of coming to our attention where we have to discuss them in more detail in this manner. But I see other names on the roster, and so I'm going to recognize my colleague, Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you very much. I just have a quick question for the director. John Martin, it's good to see you. Welcome back to the chamber. Can you describe to me or elaborate on the prioritization of LBEs in this particular RFP process?
We have significant high goals for participation in the construction program. Would expect we would receive, based on our recent history, 20 to 25% participation for. No, Kathy, do you have that information? I think it may be higher than that. And on the ongoing operation, I can give you that information now. For the ongoing operation, we've identified $6.3 million in annual subcontracting opportunities for the hotel that the Hyatt has agreed to work with us on.
So I would agree that you guys do an excellent job when it comes to the construction industry and having diversity within the construction industry. I applaud you for that. But where I think we part is your record in terms of contracting professional services within the LBE community. I think that's an opportunity for you to continue to push and reach higher goals. I know that I've been in touch with several members of your commission and I've also articulated this concern with your commissioners.
I'll be happy to share that information with you. And frankly, Supervisor, I couldn't be more proud of our accomplishments. We have extraordinary level of WBE participation in our retail and food and beverage program, among the highest in the nation. And we do a very good job in professional services, especially architecture and engineering services, promoting opportunities where many of those firms have been able to leverage work here at SFO to become successful nationally.
Thank you. I'm glad you corrected me, and I'm glad you're here to share that so that people know of the successes that we're dealing with. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Campos.
Thank you, Madam President. And again, I want to thank everyone who's worked on this. I'll be honest, if I had to make a choice, given what I think are sort of options out there in terms of this market, I don't know that I would necessarily see selecting a hotel company that has another hotel that might possibly be competing as the ideal. So I don't know that I would have done it that way. But that's not the question here, what I would have done. The question here for me is, is there a rationale and a sound basis for the selection made by the airport and this administration? And I think it really speaks to the level of respect that I certainly and many of our colleagues have for the director, that even though I don't know that I would have sort of gone down this path, notwithstanding that, because you are recommending this, I am willing to support it. The one thing that I would say, though, is I think it is the kind of contract that we have to watch. And, Director Martin is very good at what he does, but, for like all of us, he's not going to be around forever. And we have a responsibility, especially if the time comes where the director is not there, to make sure that the letter and the spirit of this contract is enforced fully. And I would say enforcement is not just dependent on the requirement of the 35%, but to me, I would also expect that the Hyatt, beyond the rates that are established for each hotel, that in the marketing they would not undermine the success of the airport hotel. And I think going back to what President Breed noted, to me, there is an expectation that I have that they will not be marketing themselves in a way that would compete with the airport hotel. And that's including, to me, the designation or identification of a 4-star or as a 4-star or a 4-diamond. And I think that we retain the right to call them to task if they continue to do that, to the extent they have done that. And beyond that, I also think that as a good business partner, it's not just how they interact with the city, but also how they interact with the public, and making sure that they are properly and accurately marketing themselves to the residents of San Francisco is important to me. So I certainly will be watching this going forward. Again, I will be voting for this on the advice of the director and out of deference to him. But with any contract, especially something of this nature, things could change, and I think that we have to be vigilant as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Campos. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
On items 14, 15, and 16, Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Christensen.
Aye.
Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener.
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos, aye. There are 10 ayes.
Those resolutions are adopted, and the ordinance passes on the first reading unanimously. Next item, please.
Item 17, ordinance to amend the administrative code to establish the Navigation Partnership Fund.
Roll call vote.
On item 17, Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Christensen.
Aye.
Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Yes.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener.
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee. Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos. Supervisor Yee, can you? I couldn't hear there was
Said
noise
no.
on this side.
No.
Yee, no. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos, aye. There are 10 ayes and 1 no.
The ordinance passes on the first reading. Next item, please.
Item 18 is an ordinance to appropriate and deappropriate approximately $9.4 million from Municipal Transportation Agency Series 2014A revenue bonds proceeds for parking garage projects to support the radio replacement project from the Municipal Transportation Agency Series 2013A revenue bonds proceeds for transit projects to pedestrian projects in fiscal years 2015 through 16.
Roll call vote.
On item 18, Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Christensen. Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Yes.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim.
Aye.
Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener.
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos, aye. There are 11 ayes.
This ordinance passes unanimously on the first reading. Item 19, please.
Item 19 is an ordinance to authorize the Municipal Transportation Agency, after issuing a competitive solicitation for brokerage services for the SF Access Paratransit Program, provisions that require the contractor and subcontractors to pay prevailing wages to drivers, dispatchers, and reservationists, and to provide transitional employment and retention services to the prior contractor's employees, and setting the prevailing wage rates for individuals providing services for the SF Access Program.
Supervisor Campos.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to take this opportunity to thank the MTA and to thank our labor partners as well for making sure that as we move forward with these types of contracts that we are in fact as a requirement for any competitive process that we add that workers should be paid a prevailing wage. And I think that it's important for us as a city to make that a priority when we issue these kinds of RFPs. And at the end of the day, if you care about workers and you care about them getting the wages they deserve to be successful and to survive in this city, you have to put up the money that it takes, and that's what this does. So I'm very grateful for that and very proud of the work that was done around this. Thank you. I ask for your support.
Thank you, Supervisor Campos. This is really great legislation, and I support it 100%. Madam Clerk, please add me as a co-sponsor.
Thank you, Madam President.
Colleagues, can we take this item, same house, same call? Without objection, the ordinance passes unanimously on the first reading. Item 20, please.
Item 20 is an ordinance to conditionally authorize the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission to enter into one or more agreements requiring expenditures of $10 million or more for electric power and related products and services to launch the city's Community Choice Aggregation Program, Clean Power SF, and to authorize the general manager of the SFPUC to deviate from certain otherwise applicable requirements of city law in such agreements.
Same house, same call. Without objection, the ordinance passes unanimously on the first reading. Item 21, please.
Item 21, resolution to retroactively authorize the Recreation and Park Department to accept and expend up to $10 million in grants from the Trust for Public Land for design and reconstruction of the playgrounds at the Joseph Alioto Performing Arts Piazza here in Civic Center Plaza, and to approve grant agreements with the Trust for Public Land for acceptance and performance of the grant services for the project term of November 5th, 2014 through January 31st, 2017.
Same House, same call. Without objection, the resolution is adopted unanimously. Item 22.
Item 22 is a resolution to retroactively approve executed master license agreements between the City Extenent Systems, GTE Mobile Net of California, and Mobilite Investments for the installation of wireless telecommunications antenna and equipment on San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency poles for an amount not to exceed $1 million per pole and a term of 9 years, having begun September 22, 2014, November 30th, 2014, and April 23rd, 2015, and to affirm the Planning Department CEQA determination.
Same House, same call. Without objection, this resolution is adopted unanimously. Madam Clerk, please read items 23 through 41 together.
Items 23 through 41 are the resolutions to declare the intent of the city to reimburse certain expenditures from proceeds of future bonded indebtedness to permit the issuance of tax-exempt residential multifamily housing revenue bonds in the following not to exceed aggregate principal amounts for the purposes of providing financing for the acquisition and rehabilitation of the following projects. For item 23, $95 million. For 311 rental housing units at 510 Folsom Street, also known as the Trans Bay Block 9. For item 24, $49 million, located at 1855 15th Street. For item 25, $48 million for 3850 18th Street. For item 26, for $44 million for 1760 Bush Street. For item 27, $30 million for 2698 California Street. Item 28, for $114 million for 330 and 320 Clementina Street. For item 29, for $81 million for 350 Ellis Street. For item 30, for $145 million for 938 Ellsworth Street. For item 31, $50 million for 145 Guerrero Street. For item 32, $156 million for 40 Harbor Road. For item 33, $30 million for 111 Jones Street and 3400 16th Street. For item 34, $51 million for 1750 McAllister Street. For item 35, $45 million for 1036 Mission Street. For item 36, $145 million for 655, 711 through 795, and 895 Pacific Street. For item 37, $137 million for 838 Pacific Avenue. For item 38, $47 million for 2451 Sacramento Street. For item 39, $84 million for 2501 Sutter Street. For item 40, $108 million for 1251 Turk Street. And for item 41, $75 million for 1300 4th Street, also known as Mission Bay Blocks South, Block 6 East.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Colleagues, can we take these items, same House, same call? Without objection, the resolutions are adopted unanimously. Next item, please.
Item 42 is an ordinance to amend the planning code and the zoning map to rezone properties facing Ocean Avenue between Phelan Avenue and Houth Street from the RH2 and RM1 to the Ocean Avenue Neighborhood Commercial Transit District, and to include them in the existing Ocean Avenue NCT District, and adopting the appropriate findings.
Colleagues, can we take this item, same House, same call? Without objection, the ordinance passes unanimously on the first reading. Item 43.
Item 43 is an ordinance to amend the general plan by amending the Rincon Hill Area Plan, policies 3.3 and 3.4, to make appropriate findings and to affirm the Planning Department CEQA determination that the amendment was within the scope of the Rincon Hill Area Plan and Program Environmental Impact Report.
Same House, same call. Without objection, the ordinance passes unanimously on the first reading. Item 44.
Item 44 is an ordinance to amend the planning code regarding bulk limits and exceptions to the tower separation requirements on 525 Harrison Street, and to amend the zoning map to redesignate a portion of Assessor's Block 3764, lot number 063, from a 65,400 R height and bulk district to a 65-250R height and bulk district, and to affirm the Planning Department's CEQA determination that these amendments were within the scope of the Rincon Hill Area Plan and the Program Environmental Impact Report.
Same House, same call. Without objection, the ordinance passes unanimously on the first reading. Item 45.
Item 45 is an ordinance to amend the administrative code to remove prohibition on the advertising of sugar-sweetened beverages on city property.
Same House, same call. Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you very much, Madam President. So, colleagues, I just want to thank you for hearing this item today. As you know, in June, the board unanimously passed legislation that would prohibit advertising sugary beverages on city property. And this legislation was passed along with two other accompanying pieces of legislation concerning sugary beverages, which including requiring warning labels on sugary beverages, the advertisement, and city spending on these SSBs. A week after the passing of the law, the Supreme Court ruled regarding the First Amendment and commercial speech, left the city attorney to reevaluate the advice that they had given us. The Supreme Court raised several legal issues that related to this ordinance. So it's for this reason that I've asked that we have we repeal the law. To those folks that join me in the fight around sugary beverages, I just want to assure you that the war still rages on, and we may have lost this particular battle, but we'll continue working to move forward. This is incredibly disappointing, but it's important that we move forward in a smart and thoughtful manner. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Supervisor Cohen. Supervisor Weiner.
Thank you, Madam President. First, I want to just thank Supervisor Cohen for her leadership on this issue. Earlier this year, we moved forward with legislation, 3 pieces of legislation. This one from Supervisor Cohen, legislation I authored requiring warning labels, health warnings on ads for sugary drinks, and legislation authored by Supervisor Marr to prohibit the city from purchasing sugary drinks. And so we all move forward together as part of our continued effort to address the explosion of type 2 diabetes and other health problems that are being fueled by these drinks. And the science, of course, has not been disputed for a long time, but becomes less and less disputed and disputable as more studies come out showing how damaging these drinks are to our community's health. It's unfortunate that the Supreme Court has fetishized commercial and corporate speech to the point that it has. We should be able to prohibit harmful products from being advertised on public property. But unfortunately, the law has changed, and so we're taking today's actions. We are moving forward with the other pieces of legislation. We will continue, I know, to all work together in coalition to address this important public health issue. And I want to thank everyone who's helped really move this movement forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Weiner. Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you. One last thing, Supervisor Weiner, thank you for being my partner in this. Supervisor Marr, I appreciate your leadership as well. I just want to offer a reminder that we didn't take down big tobacco overnight, and it is not... and we cannot expect to take the big soda industry down as well overnight. I just want to assure the public health officials and partners that are with me in this fight that we'll continue to develop policies aimed to protect the health of San Franciscan, and we will prevail in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Cohen. Colleagues, can we take this item, same house, same call? Without objection, the ordinance passes unanimously on the first reading. Madam Clerk, please call item 46.
Item 46 is an ordinance to amend the Planning Code by establishing a new citywide transportation sustainability fee and suspending the application of the existing transit impact development fee, with some exceptions, while the transportation sustainability fee remains operative. Applying the sustainability fee to hospitals and health services, to amend Sections 401 to add definitions reflecting these changes, amending Section 406 to clarify affordable housing and homeless shelter exemptions from the fee, and to make conforming amendments to the area plan fees in the Planning Code, and to affirm the Planning Department's CEQA determination and other appropriate findings.
Supervisor Cohen.
Yes, thank you very much, President Breed. Just very briefly, colleagues, this is the duplicated copy of the TSF, which was sent back to committee so that we could memorialize a new fee structure for hospital and medical services use. And after several weeks of conversation, I'm pleased to report that at the full board meeting that we had reached an agreement with the nonprofit hospitals, asking them and they accepting this ask to contribute to our transportation system. I just wanted to take a moment and thank the many departments and their staff that assisted my office in helping us come to this agreement. Ed Riskin, Alicia Baptiste in MTA, John Ram, Corey Teague, and Lisa Chin in the planning department, Colleen Chawla and the Department of Public Health, Andrea Esquide from the city attorney, David Serrano-Sewell, and members of the hospital council, and of course my very talented legislative aide, Andrea Bruss. This is the right balance that we have struck, and this ensures that both hospitals and medical service facilities are contributing to our transportation needs. I understand that our city attorney has one cleanup change to this ordinance that Mr. Givner is going to talk about, which is unrelated to the hospital fee, and I ask for your support again. Thank you.
Mr. Givner.
Deputy City Attorney John Givner. So we're recommending that the board adopt some new uncodified language. This is a strange situation where you have an ordinance that just passed and was signed by the mayor but has not yet gone into effect, and another ordinance that's essentially the same trailing it. And so we wanted to add some language to acknowledge the first ordinance, note that this new ordinance isn't intended to change that ordinance except where it specifically makes changes. There's some language in the ordinance that passed 2 weeks ago that is not included in this ordinance, and this ordinance is not intended to change any of that language. So I don't know if Supervisor Cohen has circulated the language, but I could read it into the record if anybody wants.
Thank you.
Supervisor Cohen, I don't have a copy of the amendments
All
to.
right. Mr. Givner, could you please read it into the record?
Sure. So this would be added to the uncodified sections at the end of the ordinance, stating specifically the Board of Supervisors recognizes that ordinance number 200-15, which is file number 150790, was enacted on November 25th, 2015, and has not yet become effective. This ordinance does not supersede any portion of ordinance number 200-15 except as specifically provided herein, consistent with the note. Section 411A.9 from ordinance number 200-15 was not included in this ordinance, but was adopted by ordinance number 215 and should be included in the final codification of section 411A.
Okay, Supervisor Cohen, would you like to move those amendments?
I'd like to move those amendments. Thank you.
Okay, moved by Supervisor Cohen, seconded by Supervisor Avalos. Colleagues, can we take that amendment without objection before we move on? Without objection, the amendment passes unanimously. Supervisor Avalos.
Thank you. I just want to point out that we also had another amendment that was discussed in land use as well, and that was to set July of this year as a date that non-commercial buildings would be subject to the new TSF, and the difference between what they were paying in the TIDF and the TSF. This was conforming what we already had set in place for residential buildings. And it's important to note that this one amendment has brought in about $2.1 million that will be available for transit infrastructure in San Francisco. So thank you, colleagues, for supporting that amendment.
Thank you, Supervisor Avalos. Madam Clerk, on item number 46, as amended, can we please call the roll?
Supervisor Breed?
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos? Campos, aye. Supervisor Christensen?
Aye.
Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen?
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell? Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim? Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr?
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang?
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener?
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee?
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos?
Aye.
Avalos, aye. There are 11 ayes.
This ordinance is passed unanimously as amended on the first reading. Next item, please.
Item 47 is a resolution to urge the establishment of fair and effective guidelines for beach fires at Ocean Beach that protect the public's access to recreational activities and support environmental protection.
Supervisor Marr.
Thank you. Colleagues, this resolution urges the National Park Service to protect longstanding traditions of beach fires at Ocean Beach. I wanted to say that it's really in the spirit of the partnership of our city with the National Park Service to maintain one of the treasures of San Francisco, but also to create a sustainable Ocean Beach. I wanted to thank Supervisors Tang and Yee, Avalos, Weiner, and also Farrell and Campos for co-sponsoring this. In a city faced with an affordability crisis, beach bonfires have provided a free recreational activity, one of the most amazing experiences, I believe, enjoyed by generations of families, students, young people, beach enthusiasts, surfers, and many others. The Western Neighborhoods Project that documents a lot of the history of the west side of the city, which is a nonprofit preserving the history of San Francisco's west side, shared with my office how deep this tradition goes. Historic records show San Franciscans enjoying bonfires back as far as 1890, when at Kelly's Cove, an area around Ocean Beach near the Cliff House, many surfers would warm themselves after a long day of surfing. In the early years, driftwood would be collected for use. And also in the middle of the 20th century, before modern wetsuits, surfers really needed these bonfires along the beach after surfing. A lot of the beach fires have taken place along Fulton Street entrance of Ocean Beach between the Cliff House all the way to close to Lincoln Boulevard, close to where Supervisor Tang's district is. But in 2007, after the National Park Service tried to shut down bonfires, community groups, including the Surfrider Foundation, Burners Without Borders, and many others, work with the Park Service and the city to limit the area between stairwells 15 and 20, which is roughly between Fulton and somewhere close to Lincoln Boulevard, where people are confined to about 10 to 12 fire pits. Importantly, this kept fires away from environmentally sensitive areas and homes, and it made cleanups easier as well. I think it's an example of a guideline and a partnership that has improved people's experience at Ocean Beach. I also wanted to acknowledge that new National Park Service Superintendent Leonards has graciously extended the deadline for people to give input into the process of the National Park Service on limiting bonfires. And I encourage people to go to the National Park Service website if you want to give input all the way up until Friday. The resolution that we're hearing today would establish fair and effective guidelines for bonfires at Ocean Beach, acknowledge that partnership historically that has been between our city and the National Park Service. I also wanted to say that the maintenance of Ocean Beach is a shared responsibility between all of us. And in the spirit of that, I initiated and the board approved in the past two budget cycles $235,000 to our Recreation and Parks Department, who are working with the National Park Service as well, but our Rec and Park Department creating a great volunteer effort. I wanted to thank Jad Correa, Sarah Ballard, and others from the Rec Park Department for establishing that, and also to ensure an education campaign that changes culture of people that use bonfires at the beach so that people leave no trace and they really make the park better than it was when they got there. I wanted to say that this is an important resolution because it's urging the National Park Service to listen to local communities around Ocean Beach and beachgoers and residents that have depended on bonfires as a accessible recreational activity over the years. So please continue to give input into the process as the National Park Service makes its determinations. I urge support and thank all of the co-sponsors as well.
Thank you, Supervisor Marr. Colleague, can we take this item, same house, same call? Without objection, the resolution is adopted unanimously. Item 48, please.
Item 48, a resolution to designate Edgewood Center for Children and Families as an evaluation and treatment facility pursuant to the California Welfare and Institutions Code for youth ages 5 to 17 and authorizing the Director for Behavioral Health Services to enter into a designation agreement with said facility.
Colleagues, can we take this item, same house, same call? Without objection, the resolution is adopted unanimously. Item number 49.
Item 49, motion to appoint Miriam Zosunis to the Small Business Commission, term ending January 6, 2020.
Supervisor Avalos.
Thank you. I just wanted to say how excited I was to support Miriam Zizinis for the Small Business Commission, and it was actually really great to hear from her and her family about how much she's been involved in supporting small businesses, not just her small business, but working with many, many businesses in San Francisco, and she'll be a really great addition to the Small Business Commission. Just want to thank her for her service.
Thank you. Supervisor Kim.
Thank you. I also want to say some words of support of Miriam Zuzunas, and I'm so glad that she has both applied for the Small Business Commission seat and that the Rules Committee is recommending her. Her family runs and owns Ted's Market in the South of Market, and they have been a tremendously good neighbor and have had a large footprint in the neighborhood because they have been so generous in both giving back to the neighborhood and actively participating in many activities. But it's also really great to see a young woman join one of our commissions. So many young women are small business owners here in San Francisco, and I think Miriam will do an amazing job really representing all small business owners, but in particular this voice and perspective. And I'm just really happy that you applied and that you'll be joining this city in advising us and supporting small businesses, which creates a lot of jobs here in San Francisco.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Supervisor Marr.
Thank you. I wanted to just add that I think Ms. Zuzunas brings a corner store and convenience store owner perspective to the Small Business Commission. I think that's really critical. I wanted to also just acknowledge her leadership within the Arab American Grocers Association on many challenging issues on public health and health equity, but she's been a tremendous leader on many fronts, bringing different groups together. Also her work with the Safe San Francisco Civil Rights Ordinance, Language Access Ordinance, and the Healthy Food Retailer Ordinance, tremendous work there, and even tricky small business, big chain issues like with the Formula Retail Subsidiaries Working Group. But she's an amazing leader, and I think she'll be a great addition to the Small Business Commission.
Thank you. Seeing no other names on the roster, colleagues, can we take this item, same house, same call? This motion is approved unanimously. Without objection. Madam Clerk, we're going to move to roll call for introductions.
First to introduce new business is Supervisor and President Breed.
Thank you. Colleagues, today I have 4 items. My first item is a motion requesting our budget and legislative analysts to conduct a full performance audit of all the homeless services in San Francisco. The board's contract with the budget and legislative analysts stipulates that the BLA will conduct 2 to 3 full audits each year, working under the advisement of our GAO committee. I've been on GAO for 2 years now, and the BLA previously conducted an audit of the San Francisco Fire Department and is currently working on one regarding our senior services requested by Supervisor Yee, the GAO chair. I want to thank Supervisor Farrell for joining me in requesting this audit. We are looking for, number 1, an inventory of all the homeless services offered in San Francisco with provider-level specificity. Number 2, a review of the city's homeless population data and needs assessment. And number 3, an evaluation of the contracting procedures for homeless services, including how contracted services are meeting the community's needs and how contractors are monitored for quality performance. We are requesting a particular focus on services targeted at the homeless population with behavioral health needs. Number 4, we're looking for an assessment of the existing service mix and funds to support the homeless. Supervisor Farrell previously requested a BLA report that showed the city spends about $165 million per year on homeless services. But that was over 2 years ago, and that figure is likely closer to $200 million now. And number 5, we are requesting to look at best practice surveys to identify strategies for homeless services that are succeeding in other cities. We're spending nearly $200 million each year, yet over 6,500 people still remain homeless in San Francisco, and thousands are forced to sleep on the streets every single night. It isn't right, and we have to do better, and I believe we can do better. But first, we need to understand at the most basic case-by-case or dollar-by-dollar level what is working and what isn't working, and what others are doing successfully so that we can duplicate that. I want to thank Harvey Rose, Severin Campbell, and their staff, and I look forward to reviewing that report and hosting a hearing at GAO sometime next year. The other item I want to briefly address is our ongoing efforts to increase affordable housing production, not only in District 5, but throughout the city. This morning, Mayor Lee and I announced that we were reconvening the Housing Working Group to develop a ballot measure for November 2016 that will increase the percentage of affordable housing that developers will be required to build. The Housing Working Group is a broad coalition of housing advocates, community leaders, city officials, and nonprofit and for-profit developers. I am confident we will develop a successful proposal to increase inclusionary affordable housing requirements, and frankly, we have to. The current 12% on-site requirement implemented by the voters via Prop C in 2012 is simply not doing enough. It's just not doing the job. In fact, in today's housing crisis in San Francisco, Prop C has unfortunately become obsolete and creating more affordable housing, at times preventing us from requiring more than 12%. We have felt that impact firsthand in District 5 as we try to increase affordability standards. 12% is simply not enough, and I have long been pushing for a new ballot measure in 2016 to increase affordable housing. I'm very happy we are reconvening the Housing Working Group, and I look forward to leading the effort at the Board of Supervisors. San Franciscans, even ones in well-paying, steady jobs, are struggling to find homes they can afford or to stay in homes they already have. We must push the envelope and require developers to build as much housing as possible that San Franciscans can afford, and heading into 2016, I intend to do exactly that. I also have an in memoriam for Miss Estelle Crawford. I know her niece and other family members are in the audience today. Thank you for being here, Erica Green, with your family. Ms. Crawford was the former head secretary for the San Francisco Redevelopment Agency. She was a member of the Western Addition Citizens Advisory Committee and a board member and resident of Freedom West Homes for more than 40 years. Her surviving siblings include Robert Sykes, Leroy Sykes, Cheryl Coleman, Nina Dean, Deborah Edgley, who is Erica's mom. Her children include Larry, Eric, Donna, and Deanna Cox. She also had 12 grandchildren and 5 great-grandchildren. She passed away on November 11th of this year. She leaves behind a host of family and friends and a community that truly loves her, and she will be missed. Thank you to the family members who are here today, and we will be adjourning the meeting in her honor. Last but not least, colleagues, I have an imperative item. It is of the most importance here today. We will be reviewing this item towards the end of our meeting, but I wanted to make a few comments about this item. More specifically, this is commending our colleague, Supervisor Julie Christensen. Supervisor Christensen came to the board earlier this year, hit the ground running, rolled up her sleeves, and has done a remarkable job, not just for District 3, but for the city and county of San Francisco. I remember her first meeting where she basically had a CEQA appeal in her district. She knew it inside and out and made an incredible decision, worked with both sides, and I was extremely impressed because he just hit the ground running and did a fantastic job at our first meeting. When I was out in District 3 with Supervisor Christensen and she noticed some graffiti on one of the newspaper stands and some newspaper stand was broken, she took a picture of it and sent it to DPW asking that they fix this. She stopped right in the middle of everything she was doing, and that's exactly the kind of not just Supervisor Christensen is, but that's the kind of person she is. For over 20 years, she has been an incredible advocate for District 3, fighting for the Joe DiMaggio Playground, and one of the co-founders of the Friends of the Joe DiMaggio Playground, which raised a lot of money to open that playground, which just happened less than a month ago. She was a major advocate of the North Beach Library and was very instrumental in getting that library built and open and available to the residents in her community. She was also instrumental in the Central Subway to North Beach and Fisherman's Wharf. No matter where Supervisor Christensen is, I know that her history demonstrates that she is committed to this city, and she will continue to fight hard for this city. She will continue to be an advocate for San Franciscans everywhere. She has been an amazing colleague, and I am so thankful for the time that we've had on the Board of Supervisors to work together. And so as a result of your commitment to the City and County of San Francisco, today, colleagues, I am introducing an imperative agenda item, which I rarely do, and actually I've only done on one other occasion. And today I'm introducing that to commend our colleague, Supervisor Julie Christensen, for her over 20 years of service to the City and County of San Francisco. Thank you, Supervisor Christensen, and I know when you leave the Board of Supervisors, you will continue to be the same advocate and bring that same passion that you have brought to the board. You will continue to bring that same passion to your district for years to come, and I'm just grateful to have had the opportunity to work with you, so thank you. And at this time, if there are any other members of the board who would like to say any comments, I will recognize you now before we move on to the next member on roll call for introduction. Supervisor Wiener.
Thank you very much, President Breed, for introducing this imperative item to commend our colleague and my friend, Julie Christensen. Julie, we will certainly miss you. I will miss you dearly at the Board of Supervisors, but I also know you're not going anywhere because you are deeply, deeply committed to the community. And I think the fact that after a very difficult election day, within a few days I started seeing you at community events when I might have been curled up in a ball somewhere, showed your strength and your commitment to the community. I know, I for years have been inspired by Julie's work, not just work in the community, because we all do work in the community, but really being able to deliver pretty massive contributions to the neighborhood. Not that many people, a lot of people claim credit for different playgrounds and libraries and pools and other things that go into a neighborhood. Success always has many parents. But in your case, there was not even the slightest exaggeration. Some of these things would not have happened but for your leadership. And I want to thank Mayor Lee for really, I think, making an inspired appointment to the Board of Supervisors. And it's been just a real pleasure to work with you here in this building. I know it's been a tough year. I can only imagine taking office, never having campaigned before, never having held elected office before, and having to really have the kind of fights that you've had to have over the last year immediately. That's not something I've ever gone through, because when you run for office from scratch, you build up, and by the time you take office, you've already had a lot of that experience under your belt. And so I think you conducted yourself with professionalism and grace, and it really is an honor to call you friend. So thank you for your service, and I know that service will continue.
Thank you, Supervisor Wiener. Supervisor Tang.
Thank you. Thank you, Supervisor Christensen, for your service. I definitely will miss you as well. In your short amount of time at the Board of Supervisors, I know that you have introduced just an incredible portfolio of legislation that I think will have a lot of long-lasting effects. And I know that you don't need the title of supervisor to continue doing the amazing things for District 3 and the rest of the city, which, as everyone has said, you've already demonstrated prior to even being here. I really, and our entire office has really enjoyed working with your staff. Kimia, Gary, Mason, all of them have been wonderful. And so I applaud you for, again, taking on this role when you were asked to do so. I know how you felt when you received that call. And so again, it's not easy to have to turn around and campaign so quickly, but thank you for everything you've done, and look forward to continue seeing you in the community.
Thank you, Supervisor Tang. Supervisor Farrell.
Thank you, President Breed. Julie, I'm just going to echo some of the other comments. I think as Supervisor Wiener mentioned, I know this is not the last we're going to see at all and of you, and I just want to say really on a personal level, it's been really great to work with you as a colleague. I think we all share a great camaraderie here on the Board of Supervisors, each and every one of us, and as sharing a border that we do between District 2 and District 3, it's been great to work with you, to get to know you and your husband, even getting to meet your mom and your sister, and certainly going to miss you a ton, but really look forward to working together in other capacities moving forward. And I just think that our city is so lucky to have people like yourself, thrust into this role and really into the lion's den right away, but really neighborhood leaders like yourself. And, on a personal level, again, it's just been simply a great experience getting to know you and to work with you, and really look forward to continuing that going forward, whatever capacity that may be, and really look forward to all the what's to come in the future. So congratulations on a great year.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Farrell. Supervisor Kim.
Thank you. I just also want to recognize Supervisor Christensen. Even when you aren't on the same side of issues, you can still respect one another and differing opinions, and I think that's something that I value greatly about this board. And, I have to respect anyone that works and fights very hard for their neighborhoods and their communities and for what they believe their constituents want to see. And I think we can all agree that your work on North Beach Playground and Library was incredibly important, not just for your neighborhood, but the city as well. And I think finally the one thing that we can all say is that this is a really challenging and tough job, and having watched many of us, although not all of us, experience their first year on the Board of Supervisors and all the trials and tribulations that come with it, I just have to give you major props for going through one of those years as well. I certainly had one my first year on the Board of Supervisors, and it's always challenging to watch someone else go through something like that. But you really, you dove right into it. You weren't ever scared to express your opinions and your positions, which can be very intimidating to do when you are new to chambers. But I really appreciated that you stood strong and that you continue to fight for your community here. So, looking forward to continue to working with you, no longer as supervisor, but continuing the work that you have always done.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. And so again, Supervisor Christensen, thank you. And we will be moving this imperative item agenda forward at the end of our board meeting. And with that, I wanted to also mention for my in memoriam, there are other members in the audience for Ms. Estelle that would be, if you can all stand up, please, and be recognized. I know our Commander Ali is related to Ms. Crawford, who we are doing the in memoriam for the end of the meeting. And Jada, good to see you. Thank you all so much for being here. Commander Ali, please stand as well. Thank you, and be recognized. So we will be adjourning the meeting on her behalf. And again, she will be truly missed. And thank you all for being here today. And with that, Madam Clerk, the rest I submit.
Thank you, Madam President. Supervisor Campos.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk, and wishing all of my colleagues and members of the public a very happy holiday season, and hope they had a very enjoyable Thanksgiving. I have a couple of items today, and the first is a piece of legislation that I'm introducing, and I want to thank Supervisor Farrell for working with my office and his staff to make this happen, as well as my other co-sponsors, Supervisors Avalos, Marr, and Yee. This piece of legislation ensures that we protect the very diverse culture, arts, and community festivals that make San Francisco what it is. As you look at that issue, security plays an important role in our festivals, but security can also be very costly. And what we are proposing is a set of amendments to the 10B ordinance by creating a clear timeline and a transparent process for how festival organizers apply for 10B security. We will be ensuring that festival organizers aren't hit with unforeseen costs a few days before an event, and therefore making it impossible to put that event together. We have actually been spending more than a year working on this matter, and I want to thank my staff, Carolyn Goosen, who has been spending a lot of time, and prior to Carolyn, formerly in my office, Nathan Albee. But we would not be able to be where we are today without the collaboration and input from the San Francisco Police Department, and specifically Chief Sir, who has worked with us to address some of the concerns that have been raised by the entertainment and festival community around the 10B program. Festivals are a huge economic engine for San Francisco. In the year 2014, and if you look only at LGBT festivals, the economic impact of those festivals is clear. The direct or indirect economic impact can be as high as $495 million. And more than 4,000 jobs that were supported by these festivals. And that's only LGBT festivals in 1 year, 2014. If we look at large outdoor festivals overall, looking back at the year 2014, these festivals had more than $1 billion in direct and indirect impact in the city's economy. And we're talking about festivals supporting more than 9,000 jobs here in San Francisco. My 10B legislation has three components. First, it creates a clear timeline for when festival organizers must apply for the 10B police security application process, and for when the police must respond when the number of 10B officers who would be required for each festival. The second thing that it does is that it creates an appeals process, which is currently non-existent, an appeals process through the San Francisco Chief of Police if a request for police personnel was denied, or if the suggested number of personnel that has been recommended is problematic. And then the third piece, which is actually something that I'm very excited about, is it creates a data collection process through the San Francisco Entertainment Commission detailing how many police officers are being used for events and how much money is spent related to the 10B program. By collecting this data, we can better understand how the 10B program impacts festivals and the entertainment industry as a whole. Again, I want to thank Chief Sir for his support of this legislation, as well as Lieutenant Falzon and Officer Nevin for their input. Also, a huge thanks to the festival community for the work on this. And I especially want to acknowledge the work of Terrence Allen, as well as Guy Carlson of CMAC. San Francisco would not be the incredible city that it is without many of the festivals and entertainment venues that we have. It's our music, our dance, our culture, our food that make San Francisco so unique. And we have the festival organizers to thank for the great infusion of cultural beauty that this city has. In this legislation, this set of amendments strikes the right balance between supporting these festivals and ensuring the safety of all of our neighborhoods. The second item that I have is a set of amendments around our equal pay legislation, which I previously discussed when we honored and recognized the work of the Equal Pay Advisory Board. Again, if you remember, the Equal Pay Ordinance requires contractors and subcontractors that do business on large projects here in the city to submit an equal pay report on compensation paid to employees based on gender and ethnicity. The Equal Pay Advisory Board has been meeting since the beginning of this year to analyze and recommend the best method for data collection that will identify wage gaps based on gender and ethnicity here in San Francisco, and to do so in a way that minimizes the burden on city contractors as they provide this data. Putting something like this together has been very challenging. It's something that no one in this country and arguably in the world has been able to do up to this point. So we're very grateful for the work of the advisory board. And what I'm introducing today is a hearing request, first and foremost, to review the final report that should be released in the next couple of weeks. We have actually met with the Human Rights Commission and their staff, which is overseeing this process. In anticipation of some of the recommendations, the second piece of this introduction is to amend the original legislation by extending some of the existing deadlines that are embedded in the ordinance so that they're aligned with the recommendations of the board. We specifically want to make the following points to ensure the proper implementation of the equal pay legislation. That the first phase will involve working with the Comptroller's Office to develop a pilot study for compensation analysis. Because the city has data on race and gender on its employees, the advisory board recommends conducting compensation analysis internally within the city in the first phase of the implementation, which I think makes a great deal of sense. The second phase would involve training and guidance so that contractors have a clear understanding of the real-world application of the data collection and reporting methods that happen as part of phase one. Phase 2 will also include a request for covered contractors to update their records based on race and ethnicity. Phase 3 of the implementation will allow equal pay reporting to piggyback on the system the City Comptroller's Office is developing that will more universally collect data from city contractors. And then Phase 4 will implement the requirements of the legislation for contractors and grant recipients that do not currently use the elation system. I agree with the Equal Pay Advisory Board that a phased implementation of the Equal Pay Ordinance makes a great deal of sense. It's advisable here to more thoroughly and adequately implement that law. Therefore, the ordinance that I'm introducing today would amend the administrative code to extend the deadline for the submission of the initial equal pay reports from January 31st, 2016 to July 3rd, 2017. The ordinance also extends the sunset date of the Equal Pay Advisory Board to July 2nd, 2018. The final item is not something that I'm actually happy that I have to do, but it's something that I believe is necessary as we move forward with the continued implementation of the city's identification card program, the ID card that San Francisco has been leading the way and has become such a success. Unfortunately, I have recently heard from a number of constituents about a number of disturbing accounts from members of some communities that have had a very negative experience going to the process of applying for a city ID card, and the way in which many of these individuals have felt disrespected in that office is very alarming. And it is because of that today I am introducing a hearing request on the operations, the policies, training procedures, and the overall customer service that takes place with the city's identification card program. We specifically asked the county clerk of the city to do a presentation as part of this hearing. and we specifically want them to explain what kind of procedures, training, and other processes they have in place to ensure that their office is free of xenophobia, homophobia, transphobia as they implement the program. A particular concern has been issues that have been raised by members of the transgender Latino community. Many transgender Latino women who have gone to this office and have felt disrespected, and actually concerns that we have also heard from members of the Latino community and specifically the day laborer program. You know, what makes San Francisco unique is that we can create programs like the municipal ID card. It's something that then Supervisor Tamamiano introduced, and that legislation has become a model for the rest of the country, and we want to continue to be a model, and for that to happen, we need to make sure that the concerns that have been raised are addressed swiftly and quickly. The rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Campos. Madam President.
Thank you. I want to go back to our 3 p.m. special order, Madam Clerk. Let's go to one of our hearings, which should not take very long, items 53 through 61.
Madam President, you're speaking about the 639 Peralta Avenue?
No, the Ord Court.
Ord. Okay. Items 58 through 61. Items 58 through 61 comprise the special order at 3 p.m. for a public hearing of persons interested in the Planning Commission's certification of a conditional use authorization dated September 24, 2015 for a project located at 22 Ord Court. Item 59 is the motion to approve the Planning Commission's decision and approve the conditional use authorization. Item 60 is the motion to disapprove the Commission's decision, and item 61 is a motion to direct the preparation of findings.
Colleagues, we have before us now the appeal of the conditional use authorization for this project at 22 Ord Court in District 8. For this hearing, we will be considering whether or not to approve the Planning Commission's conditional use authorization to permit lot coverage of a parcel to exceed 55% and an increase to the existing square footage in excess of 3,000 square feet and or more than 100% by constructing a new approximately 3,110 gross square foot two-story dwelling unit at the rear of the existing lot. Without objection, we will proceed as follows. Up to 10 minutes for presentation by the appellant or the appellant representative. Up to 2 minutes per speaker in support of the appeal. Up to 10 minutes for a presentation from the Planning Commission. Up to 10 minutes for the project sponsor or their representative, and up to 2 minutes per speaker in opposition to the appeal. And finally, up to 3 minutes for a rebuttal by the appellant or the appellant representative. So at this time, we will open up the hearing, and I will recognize Supervisor Scott Wiener.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And colleagues, I'm happy to report that we do have a resolution of this item. First of all, I want to thank Andres Power in my office, who really did yeoman's work in helping to mediate between the project sponsor and the appellant to reach this resolution. It took a lot of effort, and I want to publicly thank Mr. Power for his extraordinary work in getting this appeal resolved. Colleagues, I want to just outline to you the agreement of the parties, and at the conclusion of the hearing, I will make a motion to reject the conditional use and to adopt conditional use as revised, and I'll articulate that motion at the end of the hearing. And my understanding is that the two sides will affirm that they've agreed to these terms. So I want to briefly outline for you what the parties' agreement is. In addition to the conditions imposed by the Planning Commission when it issued the conditional use, the amendments per the agreement are as follows. Reducing the massing of the existing 22 Ord Court building and allowing for additional excavation on the ground floor, requiring a setback of the roof deck above the existing building and the new building facing State Street, adding sound-rated and bird-safe glass as the roof deck enclosure, maintaining the approved 6-foot setback from the rear property line for the new building on 22 Ord Court facing State Street, and requiring permeable and landscaped areas within this setback, requiring that a tree protection plan be prepared and submitted for the significant trees located at 24 Ord Court should any construction occur within their drip line. I also understand that the parties have come to a separate agreement on a future project that may occur at 24 Ord Court next door, although 24 Ord Court is not subject to the appeal before us today. So those are the amendments to the conditional use that the parties have agreed to. And so, Madam President, I understand you'll proceed with the hearing now, and I would ask that the parties, as they come up, indicate their agreement to these changes.
Thank you, Supervisor Weiner. Okay, so the appellant or the appellant representative can now come forward.
Good afternoon.
Madam, please speak directly into the microphone.
This microphone.
Either will do.
Okay. My name is Mary Ann Dresner, and I am speaking on behalf of Jack Keating, who is the named appellant in this matter. Jack Keating is the chair of the Eureka Valley Neighborhood Association, also known as EVNA, of its Planning and Land Use Committee. Jack Keating has authorized me to state to the supervisors that the parties have come to an agreement on the future project and that we no longer oppose the project at 22 Ord Court based on the agreement reached with the project sponsors.
Thank you. Okay, are there any members of the public who'd like to speak in support of the appeal? You will have 2 minutes.
Yes, my name is Sylvia Johnson, and I've been overviewing with Washington, D.C. comments with Columbia State, and this is going to change a lot of this minutes that has been said, which is going to be in the different comments, and I do think that this should be charged because it's embarrassment of any people that had, thought that I was trying to be rude, but I was trying to be real nice as a little puppy dog, and are like our children that we need to learn about a lot of different other things that we haven't been, organized in, that we can have better America, and that we can learn for all our examples that have been put on tape, and for all examples that we have been in our percentage and the view points that we had not got released from, only certain jugs, in which it was not going to be in this resolution, and that we have better compliments that we need to work on, that we see in other areas that we haven't been in our schools. And you see us going to find out all this information that they need to know to organize and to put people in the right places and timing, and to make sure that they don't miss the times that we need in our rewards and our maximum percentages of our housing. It needs to be built for our children and for our little things that being.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to speak in support of the appeal? Seeing none, public comment is closed. And I'm assuming the Planning Department does not have a presentation since there's an agreement that has been reached?
We do have a presentation, but given the statements by the appellant, there seems to be no reason to present it, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. So for the project sponsor, you will have up to 10 minutes.
Thank you. Alan Murphy from Perkins Coie on behalf of the project sponsor, Kenneth Tam. We do agree to the modified conditions of approval and appreciate the board's consideration of approving the conditional use authorization with those modified conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on behalf of the project sponsor? And seeing none, public comment is closed. And is there rebuttal? I'm assuming since there's an agreement, there is no rebuttal. Okay, colleagues, item number 58, the hearing has been held and is now closed, and this matter is in the hands of the Board of Supervisors. Supervisor Wiener.
Thank you, Madam President. So I would first make a motion to amend item 60, which is the item to disapprove the conditional use authorization, to amend item 60 with the additional conditions that I articulated at the beginning of this hearing, which we've distributed in writing to members of the board, and I'll then make a subsequent motion.
So you want to amend the item?
Item 60, the disapproval.
Okay, Supervisor Wiener has made a motion to amend. Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Farrell. Colleagues, can we take the amendment without objection? Without objection, the amendment passes unanimously. And Madam Clerk, Supervisor Wiener.
And then, Madam President, I'll make a further motion to reject the conditional use that was issued by the Planning Department and to issue effectively a revised conditional use. Specifically, I move item 60 as amended and move to table items 59 and 61.
Okay, Supervisor Wiener has made a motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Farrell. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Supervisor Breed?
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos? Campos, aye. Supervisor Christensen?
Aye.
Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen? Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell? Aye. Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim? Aye. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr? Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang?
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener?
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee?
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos?
Aye.
Avalos, aye. There are 11 ayes.
Okay, item 60 as amended, it passes, and item 59 and 61 are both tabled. Madam Clerk, can we please go to the next 3 p.m. special order? The Peralta is going to be continued. Supervisor Campos, let's go to call item 54 and 57, please.
Items 54 through 57 comprise the public hearing of persons interested in the Public Works decision dated September 18th, 2014, approving a tentative map for a 2-unit new construction condominium project located at 639 Peralta Avenue. Item 55, 56, and 57 are the motions that approve, disapprove, and direct the preparation of findings for the tentative parcel map.
Supervisor Campos.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, we continue this item before because we are we're waiting for action by the courts. The court in this case has set a trial for July 2016 in this matter, and defendants have responded to that by proposing mediation, and that mediation is set to take place December 10th. So with that in mind, I hereby make a motion to continue open this item until January 26, 2016, in accordance with the court's actions.
Thank you, Supervisor Campos. Supervisor Campos has made a motion to continue the item to January 26, 2016, seconded by Supervisor Marr. Are there any members of the public who'd like to make public comment on the continuance? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Okay, colleagues, can we take the continuance without objection? Without objection, the continuance passes. This item will be continued to January 26, 2016. All right, Madam Clerk, our final 3 p.m. special order, items 50 through 53. Please call those.
Items 50 through 53 comprise the special order at 3 p.m. for for a public hearing of persons interested in the Public Works decision dated August 24th, 2015, approving a proposed four-lot subdivision located at 40 Bernal Heights Boulevard, and to make the environmental findings under CEQA. Item 51 is the motion to approve the decision and approve the tentative map for the Bernal Heights Boulevard project. Item 52 is the motion to disapprove the decision and disapprove the tentative map for this project. And item 53 is a motion directing the preparation of findings.
Okay, colleagues, is there a motion to excuse Supervisor Campos from this item? Motion by Supervisor Tang, seconded by Supervisor Yee. Without objection, Supervisor Campos is excused. All right, colleagues, we have before us today an appeal of the tentative map for the project at 40 Bernal Heights. For this hearing, we will be considering whether the decision of the Public Works Department approving the tentative map for a proposed four-lot subdivision located at 40 Bernal Heights Boulevard is consistent with the general plan or any specific plan that applies. Without objection, we will proceed as follows. Up to 10 minutes for the appellant to describe the grounds of their appeal. Up to 2 minutes for public commenters to speak in support of the appeal. Up to 10 minutes for representatives of the Department of Public Works or the Planning Department to describe the grounds for their decision to approve the tentative map. Up to 10 minutes for real party in interest to present, and up to 2 minutes for public commenters to speak in support of the real party and interest. And finally, the appellant will have up to 3 minutes for a rebuttal argument. Okay, with that, we will now move forward with this hearing, and the appellant is up for up to 10 minutes for a presentation.
Good afternoon, President Breed and Supervisors. Before I start my 10 minutes, I'd like to make a procedural motion, if I might. We were just informed this morning, I see the time is going. Really not the substance of our appeal. We were informed this morning about the recusal of Supervisor Campos. This matter has been pending for months, and we're a little taken aback by that. We have measured the lot ourselves and found that it was more than 500 feet away from Supervisor Campos's house. But more importantly, we believe that Supervisor Campos' knowledge of the neighborhood and input into the decision is essential. We do not believe there's a conflict here. This is not about money. Denial of this project would not benefit Supervisor Campos. Indeed, the building of $3 million houses around the corner from me might well benefit me. This is about neighborhood quality, neighborhood character. It is, and therefore we do not believe there's a conflict, and we would request that the Board of Supervisors obtain an opinion from the Fair Political Practices Commission that Supervisor Campos is not conflicted in this matter. That's our motion.
Sir, your time is ticking.
All right.
You have 8 minutes and 28 seconds left.
Well, I would request, President Breed, that I have 10 minutes to address the merits. That was a procedural matter. It was sprung on us this morning, as I say. My name is Chris Whitteman. I live in Bernal Heights and am here representing myself and approximately 120 neighbors in the immediate vicinity of the planned subdivision and 30 or more outside of the 300-foot radius. We want to thank you for hearing us today. Although it was difficult for many to leave work to attend today, a number of the neighbors are here in attendance, and I would ask that they stand so that the board can see the broad support we have. We have also prepared a graphic illustration of the distribution of opposing parties to this subdivision. The subdivision's in black. The opposing parties are in red. I do notice this red should be here, so there's a couple of small little errors in this, but the fact of the matter is this represents the distribution of the 150 people who have opposed the project, all of the people immediately adjacent to the project oppose this project. I would like to also address the remaining supervisors in the room and suggest to you that this is a matter of citywide importance. I know you're involved with large downtown development issues, but I submit to you that healthy development in the city's neighborhoods is essential to the ecology of the city. I'm sure many of you have walked around the West Village in New York City, other areas like that, and have seen the way that small carriage homes and townhouses stand in relation to the large towers of Wall Street and Madison Avenue. That is the same ecology and relationship that we're talking about here. Bernal Heights is a small village, and it's essential to this city's ecology, and the granting of this subdivision diminishes the character and quality of that village. Over the past year and a half, we've met repeatedly with the developers and the planning department, urging them to consider our concerns about neighborhood character as defined by building mass ratio of built space to lot and relationships among blocks of houses. These efforts have fallen on deaf ears. This brings us to a threshold matter. I'm sure you've all read the planning department memo, which claims that our issues are planning issues and not subdivision issues. We urge you to reject this contention for 3 reasons. Number 1, we strongly believe that the preservation of neighborhood character, a priority in the planning code, the Bernal Heights Special Use District, and the master plan, begins with the footprint of the lots. In fact, we have before us concrete plans for these 4 proposed parcels. Indeed, the planning memo, which you have, commingles planning and subdivision concepts throughout. Most importantly, the State Subdivision Act requires a legislative body of a city to deny approval of a tentative map if it is not consistent with applicable general and specific plans. Thus, we contend you cannot approve this subdivision if it will result in violations of those plans. We believe that a 4-lot subdivision is inevitably inconsistent with the character of the neighborhood. We talk a lot about character. Let me just quote very briefly from the Bernal Heights Special Use District. In order to reflect the special characteristics and hillside topography of an area of the city that has a collection of older buildings situated in lots generally smaller than the lot patterns in other low-density areas, there shall be a Bernal Heights Special Use District. This is the culmination of a long history. In 1979, Bernal neighbors, they actually began in the 60s when there was just, as now, a gold rush of development. Large houses were built in Bernal. The neighbors first got together for the Bernal Heights East Slope study in 1979, and in 1986, the city adopted the Bernal Heights East Slope building guidelines, neither of which are considered in the the planning department's memo. In 1991, the Bernal Heights Special Use District was adopted. Again, that is not really addressed in the memo. So we're here today on 2 issues. All of the city's general and specific plans call for community input and involvement, but our input in this case has been systematically ignored. There are 2 issues. One is neighborhood character, the mass density and sheer size of this development. To quantify our perception, we analyzed the ratio of built space to open space, and we shared our findings with the planning department. In short, we found that compared to the average of buildings in our neighborhood, within 300 feet of the site, the subdivision proposes to put substantially bigger lots on substantially bigger buildings on substantially smaller lots. This creates a density that is out of character with the neighborhood. The Planning Department memo ignores this data, and instead on page 3 refers to the smallest and the largest of the Bernal lots rather than analyzing the prevailing sizes. Our second argument, which the planning fails to meaningfully address, is our repeated suggestion that planning and the developers consider a 3-parcel solution. On this point, the Planning Department merely repeats what the developers have threatened. On the last page of the planning memo, we read this: while 3 parcels would reduce the overall density of the subject property, it may have an inverse impact on massing. This is because there are no side setbacks or maximum floor areas applicable to this site. Notice that the planning memo concedes that the 3-parcel solution would reduce the overall density. Notice also the use of the word may relating to massing. The Planning Department itself is not sure. More specifically, the notion that there will be little or no restraint on the size of buildings in a 3-parcel development writes large portions of the code of the special use district of the Bernal Heights planning guidelines out of existence. Section 242E2 of the building code, which is the Bernal Heights special use district, has several provisions that limit the size of buildings on lots deeper than 70 feet, which lot number 3 would be, and expands the size of the backyard the larger the lot is. So by subdividing into 4 smaller lots, the developers avoided this. The Planning Department memo also does not consider front setbacks. It does not consider how this build to the maximum envelope approach is inconsistent with the Bernal and citywide guidelines and the general plan, which it has to do to comply with the subdivision code.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Before we move to public comment in support of the appeal, I do, since the appellant raised an issue about Supervisor Campos's residence and the 500-foot rule, the 500-foot rule is a bright line rule. If you own property within 500 feet of the subject property, you are legally prohibited under state law from participating in the adjudication of the appeal. And when we take office, I know I was given a map with a circle around where I live, and so I'm going to just ask the city attorney to comment on that, because I know that supervisors do always consult with the planning department and with the city attorney on these issues, just so that we're all very careful.
Deputy City Attorney John Givner, that's correct, Mr. Chair. The Planning Department prepared a map for Supervisor Campos when he first took office in 2009, or shortly after he first took office, with a 500-foot radius around the property. We reviewed that map with the supervisor and his staff earlier today and concluded that the proposed project is within the 500-foot radius. The current Fair Political Practice Commission rules on this question provide that essentially Supervisor Campos has a conflict unless the FPPC has provided him written advice concluding that based on all of the factors, his property will not be materially impacted by the project. Because the FPPC hasn't issued any written advice and we haven't asked for it at this point, we've advised Supervisor Campos that he must recuse himself in this matter.
Thank you very much. Okay, we will now move to any public comment in support of the appeal. Public comment will be 2 minutes. If there are any members of the public who wish to comment in support of the appeal, would you please line up? If there is anyone who, due to disability or any other need, needs to go early, just let us know and we will accommodate that. First speaker.
Members of the Board of Supervisors, Ray Hartz, Director, San Francisco Open Government. The Good Government Guide stipulates that any body, public body, holding a hearing has to give the appearance of being fair. And I would submit that because the members of this body were not paying attention to the appellant during his speaking, in fact, 3 of them were over here having a little jovial conversation, they are not receiving a fair hearing. And you have, unfortunately, prejudiced their hearing because you didn't listen to what the person was saying. Supervisors Avalos and Wiener and can't remember the other name, were over here having a private conversation. That is not fair. If you are a hearing officer, you have an obligation to at least listen to what the people are saying to you. You get away with not listening to the public on a regular basis, but when you're holding a hearing, you need to be fair, and you're not fair. You are over there texting on your phone. You are over there reading something else. They're doing anything but listening to the appellants. And you can't call yourself fair if you're not going to listen to both sides.
Next speaker.
My name is Steve Fritsch Rudzer. I'm a neighbor. Being involved in this process for the last 18 months or so has been an education, albeit a sort of sad one. From the beginning, the neighborhood, over 150 individuals, have spoken with an unusually unified voice. This has never been a NIMBY issue. We realize the new owners have the right to develop the lot. With a unified voice, we've asked the developers and the planning department to take seriously the statements about neighborhood character in both the city code and the special regulations relating to Bernal Heights. There have been numerous meetings with the developers, the architects, and the planning department, but from the beginning, I felt we've been consistently patronized. While we talk about the issues of mass, density, topography, and neighborhood character, we're forced to listen to long presentations on promised landscaping that is clearly simply staging for the ultimate sale of these luxury homes. Subdividing this unique and odd triangle into 4 lots for larger than average homes requires the developer to cut down 2 of the very few tall trees in the neighborhood, 2 beautiful Monterey cypress, build right to the street with no setbacks, and ignore the topography of the site. Though it clearly isn't happening in this situation, it is not outrageous to think that the developers and architect would take these things into consideration. I know that some builders actually do care about how what they are building relates to the neighborhood and have considerations beyond how to eke out every last cent from a small piece of land. Unfortunately, in this situation, our input has not simply fallen on deaf ears, but most of the meetings with the developers have ended with what sounded like threats of changing the design or the placement of the houses to make it worse to punish the neighbors because of our opposition. While I understand the Planning and Board of Supervisors must protect the rights of individual investors, it seems to me that doesn't require actively assisting investors to get the most money from their investments. The issue of neighborhood character is a real one. It's written into the codes. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next speaker.
This is Edward Johnson, and I think this has a lot of doubt and coordinary with continental crowns. Eyesight, which has already been discriminated by the main operator at that sort of superior proceedings. No for means of condition that defect to sign impairs of using file, fashion, and safety devices that can come with the including for devices that result in eye abuse and the nurses for consumers on 2 manufacturer authorizations in manufacturer eyes with other and improve with 5, and there will be failure to following manufacturing with writing and service maintenance with guidance that future of the customers, which are process of our proceedings, which reviewing or examples for imitation repairs within that 1 year of the different dates from first manufacturing systems and devices listed for systems with devices dealing authorization by manufacturing repair and such device notifications in our sequences of our doubts and considerations of peace and freedom that we have, told us the late days, times, and necessary shipments and repairs that manufacturing our equipment, that floodings and all of our damages that grow, and for fishing and the sea and everything that we had considered.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Thanks for listening. My name is Sandy Barra, and I live within a couple of houses of this project. I've lived there for 12 years with my family, and all of that time I've worked at a school that's a neighborhood school, and many of our families live in Bernal Heights, and if you want to know what attracts them to Bernal Heights, it's the unique character and community that you feel when you live there. It's pretty unique and amazing. And I just want to say that neighborhood character does not come from what the buildings look like on the outside and the finishes that you put on the buildings. It comes from the mass of the buildings that build space to the lot size and how the block that's being created is going to match with the rest of the blocks in the area. This all has an impact on the character of our neighborhood. We strongly believe that the preservation of our neighborhood character, which is a priority, which Chris talked about in the codes that have been created to specially preserve our neighborhood, it begins with the footprints of the lot. And this 4-lot subdivision is building out to the max. It doesn't include a setback or yard space. It's just not in consistency with what most of us live in. So I ask you today, when you vote, to really think about the future of the city, and especially my neighborhood, which I love, Bernal Heights, and just think about how it's going to affect future building. I hope it's not setting a precedent. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Lindy McKnight, and I want to emphasize that 150 of my neighbors agree that we are not against this development. We're not a bunch of neighborhood zealots that don't want our neighborhood to change. I was formerly a commissioner on the redevelopment commission, the agency, and I voted for many of the high-rises that we now see sprouting up south of Market. And I voted for approval of those designs because they fit into that neighborhood that we're creating south of Market. When I have friends that visit me in San Francisco, I don't just take them to the wharf. I don't just take them to Alcatraz. I drive them around the different neighborhoods because I'm really proud of how each one of those neighborhoods is unique and has a different feel, different architecture. And it's what makes up, it's why we love this city. And Bernal is that type of neighborhood. It has a certain character, it has a certain feel. And yes, the neighborhood is changing. We see a lot of the facades now are having modern architecture. Some people are adding a second story. But the larger homes are predominantly, are in a minority, and it's predominantly very small houses in Bernal. And I'm sure you all have driven through there and you know that. This development is basically no setbacks, and is just a wall of large, out-of-character houses right up against the street. The house right across the street from it is under 1,000 square feet. These houses are 2,300 with roof decks and garages. They're huge. So we feel it's important that 4 lots are too many. The mass and the density of the project is too large. And we just want homes that fit in with our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Michael Lerner. I live at 9 Nebraska Street, which is a half a block from the proposed development. I've lived there since 1983, so that's the last 32 years. And in that time, I've seen a lot of changes happen in Bernal Heights. I remember when just 2 blocks away, the streets were unpaved. They were just dirt roads. And now that's changed. I've been involved in this process now for the last 2 years, going to meetings with the design board for Bernal Heights. And during that time, I've heard all my neighbors be very reasonable about this process. Nobody has said, don't build, leave this as open space. Everybody has said, the developer has a right to build on that property, but keep it in character with the existing community. the reason why we all have lived in Bernal Heights, love Bernal Heights, and why 150 of us have taken time out of our very busy lives to sign letters, to talk, to get together, to be here, to appeal to you that we're not just fighting for our own self-interest, because if we were, what I would say, and what every real estate agent I've spoken to said, your value will only go up if you have $3 million houses a half a block from yours. But we're here to fight for the very soul of our neighborhood and our community so that it will stay like that for ourselves, for our children, family, and friends. And we're asking you to think about that seriously. Why have 150 people in a city where you can barely get that many to agree on anything come together to say this is not right? Build something that is in character with the existing neighborhood so that we can keep that little place that everybody refers to as being very special and keep it special. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, and thank you for being open to listening to us. My name's Betsy Brown. I live at 2 Nebraska Street, directly across from the building site. And I don't think there's anybody here who knows that site more intimately than I do, having been its neighbor for 20 years or more. It's right across the street. Never did I imagine from the moment that I moved into that house that there would be 4 buildings across the street wedged into a very narrow, irregularly shaped lot with a kind of a strange slope and a very narrow triangle apex. I always knew I'd have a neighbor there at some point. I'm not opposed to having buildings erected there, but what we're looking at here is something that's dramatically out of character with the surrounding neighborhood, and it all begins with the subdivision decision. That's something that we really want to stress, that we're not here to kind of put the kibosh on building altogether, but we do want building that is in keeping with and compatible with the surrounding neighborhood so that we can preserve the character of a place that's gained notoriety for its special nature. What you can see in your packages is some research that we did that Chris Witteman already referred to that looks at the relationship between houses built on the lots and the overall size of the lots. And it gives you a sense of how much built space there is in relation to open space. What we find in our analysis is that the proposed 4 buildings for this proposed 4-lot subdivision completely flip the predominant ratio, putting far more built space in comparison to open space on every lot. Now, if we were talking about one house, it'd be one thing, but we're talking about an entire block of 4 houses, and it's the subdivision that opens the door to this. So that's what we'd like to reinforce for you, that the subdivision is not an irrelevant aspect of this, that it's actually instrumental. It's fundamental to what happens next with this property. So we'd like you to consider that as you think about this decision. Thanks again.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Board of Supervisors. Thank you for listening to us. My name is Nick Griffin. I live at 101 Prentice Street, which is a block away from the proposed site. I've lived in that house for 22 years. The back windows of my house look over that parcel, and I've really enjoyed watching the trees grow, because one of the things they did was cover the very stark walls of the sides of what I thought were really large buildings along the Carver Street right-of-way. In fact, the row along Bernal Heights Boulevard, I thought to myself, how on earth did such large buildings get built and they're so out of scale? Well, those buildings will really become dwarfed by this project because they do have a setback, and apparently this project doesn't have a setback, and they are not nearly as tall as the buildings that are proposed on this site. So that is a huge shock and a deep sadness for me. Also, just the question of what really, when you chop it up into 4 instead of 3, you've got smaller parcels. You're trying to fit larger houses on smaller parcels. Got less open space, no possibility of growing trees and having decent backyards. This subdivision should not have been approved, and it was going to individually cost us a lot of money to protest, which I think is really unfair. And I urge you to support this appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Thank you. I also thank you for the opportunity to hear us. My name is Michael Sneed. I'm an immediate proximate neighbor. My address is 130 Chapman Street. I appeal the decision to grant four subdivisions to the Powhatan Triangle because the lot is a triangular shaped. It's not rectangular, and making it more difficult to fit 4 rectangular lots into that triangle. And such density, should 4 be granted, would entice the building process later on to deny the setbacks and other neighborhood concerns in order to fit in that irregular shaped thing. Primarily, my opposition is because the 4 subdivision plan, just the 4 subdivision plan, runs counter to the existing residential neighborhood character that we and the 150 red dots you see on our map represent. And that existing, it's already there, residential neighborhood character is expressed in those 150 immediate and surrounding neighbors expressing their opinion that the 4-lot separation is too much. The existing residential character is one of cooperation. Our neighbors cooperate. We support each other. We listen. We consider each other's things. The 4-lot subdivision defies or ignores the concept of this existing, we're already there, residential character. Such a 4-lot subdivision seems to favor new residents to develop over existing residents to live there. We already live here. With our diversity, wide diversity of characters in our character, with the wide diversity of our houses, our ethics, our living size to lot size ratio, and our community spirit, we already live here. We are the existing residential character. And please note, we're agreeable to growth, we're agreeable to building, we're helpful to ease the housing crisis that exists in San Francisco. Certainly, 3-lot subdivision is able to accommodate all of those concerns and maintain this essential existing neighborhood character. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to speak in support of the appeal at this time? Seeing none, public comment is closed. And now we will have up to 10 minutes for representatives of the Department of Public Works or the Planning Department to describe the grounds for their decision to approve the tentative map.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Bruce Storrs, City and County Surveyor. It's a 4-lot subdivision, as you probably know. We received the application May 8th, 2014, referred it out to city agencies in June of 2014. We got the final approval from the Department of City Planning on August 17th of this year, of 2015. We give the project tentative approval on the 24th and received the notice of appeal on the 9th. Very briefly, to give planning as much time as possible, at this point, Public Works has no information to indicate that the tentative map failed to undergo proper CEQA review or is not consistent with the general plan, and Public Works recommends that the board upholds the application as approved on August 24th. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the board. Anne-Marie Rogers, Planning Department staff. I'm joined today by Brittany Bindex, who's the project planner for the subdivision. I'll be presenting our department's response to the planning issues, which, as you've heard, are kind of the predominant issues of this subdivision appeal. So first, let's talk about the subdivision process, as well as the extensive planning process that is already underway for the proposed buildings. The subdivision is the matter before you, and this would create, as you heard, those lots 4 that are currently envisioned in the single-family neighborhood that exists. Our department's review responsibility for this appeal is to confirm that the subdivision is consistent with the general plan, compliant with the plan code, and then make a recommendation to DPW. In addition, and through a separate process with its own appeal windows, the planning department must also review the proposed homes. During our review of the construction, we look at and have the ability to alter the proposed massing, which is quite important to the folks here today. Here again, we review against the general plan, planning code, and then we also add in the design guidelines. The review of the proposed construction is underway. After determining that the designs are fully compliant, the department will then provide public notice as required by the code. It is during this time that our local practice is to provide this more specific review of the design and the scale and massing of the buildings. This practice allows us to consider massing at a time when we have the ability to modify it. And it is here that staff or anyone who has concerns about the development will have an opportunity to request a hearing before the Planning Commission called discretionary review. At the time of the subdivision, our review concentrates on the act of the subdivision itself. Are the lots code complying? Clearly, yes. Is the scale of 4 lots and 4 potential buildings appropriate with the general plan and the planning code? Again, yes. These issues presently raised by the appellant are generally best addressed as part of development review and not the subdivision. If the DR is requested, staff, the public, and the commission can contribute to the discourse on massing, which is important. And the commission can provide specific direction based upon the design guidelines, meaning both staff and the planning commission yet to consider and impose their modifications to address the appellant's concerns about building scale. Today, we would suggest that the initial decision to subdivide into 4 lots is appropriate and should be approved. So let's consider their concerns today. In regards to concern about density, the proposed subdivision reduces 1 large lot into 4 properties ranging, as you've heard, from 1,755 square feet to 2,073 square feet. The code minimum is 1,750 per square feet, and all 4 lots would exceed the minimum requirements and are consistent with a single-family zoning district. There is actually a process to make even smaller lots than what the code requires, but in this case, the project sponsor has not pursued the variance that would enable that, and they're providing the standard lot size. Second, on scale and neighborhood character. The appellant has argued that approval of the subdivision encourages development that is out of scale with the prevailing neighborhood character. However, approval of the tentative map does not automatically entitle the property owner to develop to the maximum as allowed by code and law. Staff and the commission frequently modify projects during entitlement. So on the related question, on the matter of 3 lots versus 4 lots, contrary to the appellant's claim, we did address this in appeal response before you. In particular, response to the concern about the ultimate size of the buildings, we believe that 4 lots would result in a better project. It is 1 more house, true, but smaller building mass overall. If only 3 lots were approved, as the various controls for setbacks and rear yard requirements were applied, they'd be applied only 3 times instead of 4. This would enable each actual building to be increased to a larger size. And this in turn may encourage larger single-family homes and, more importantly, as you've heard from people today, result in 1 less home. Bernal is a neighborhood with small lots and small houses. And because of this, and because we have a housing crisis, we would recommend that the 4 houses be built here, consistent with the zoning, the general plan, and design guidelines. And lastly, for some clarifying information on the Bernal Special Use District, there are no additional requirements or smaller lot sizes in the Bernal SUD. They rely on the General Planning Code lot size requirements. The way that the Bernal SUD envisions handling scale is through the massing of the buildings during the entitlement process. And that's what we're suggesting today. That concludes my presentation, unless there's any questions.
Supervisor Avalos.
Thank you. Just a question for Ms. Rogers. And what are the entitlements that we're expecting during the development review?
In this case, the application that we have before us is code complying, so there is no CU or no discretionary action required. However, the public could request a DR hearing before the commission.
Okay, so is there any, if the public does not request a DR hearing, there will be no action before the Planning Commission, is that correct?
It's most likely. Staff could always DR the project if we felt it were out of scale. We're still analyzing the project at this point. Review is underway.
Okay, and then another question. If during project review, the Planning Commission determined that the project would be better suited for 3 building parts, divided into 3 instead of 4. Could that change be made?
Yes. The Planning Commission is in no way bound to approve 4 houses, and they could certainly provide direction to the applicant on how to revise their application and submit new applications. It would be a new subdivision permit to DPW and new building entitlement applications to our department for review.
What would the process be for that if the public wanted to pursue that?
The Commission would hear the DR requests and express dissatisfaction with the project and suggest ways that they could come back with a revised project that might satisfy the Commission.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Avalos. Seeing no other names on the roster, we will move on with the hearing and ask for the real party in interest to present at this time. You will have up to 10 minutes.
Thank you and good afternoon, Supervisors. I'm John Kevlin with Ruben, Junison Rose here on behalf of the project sponsors, Kieran and Patrick Hardy. The appeal before you today on its face challenges the subdivision of the existing lot at Bernal Heights and Powhatan. But in fact, the appellant is using the subdivision appeal process to challenge a development project outside the appropriate city approval process. The item at issue before you today is the subdivision of an existing 7,612 square foot lot into 4 separate parcels ranging from 1,755 square feet to 2,073 square feet. Lot subdivisions are governed by the State Subdivision Map Act and San Francisco Subdivision Code. The State Map Act provides 6 considerations which a local legislative body may consider on appeal of a subdivision, and none of these 6 considerations apply to the current appeal. I'll just walk through these briefly. The first consideration, one, whether the subdivision complies with the Map Act or Subdivision Code. The subdivision has been confirmed in compliance with the Map Act and the Subdivision Code by both the Department of Public Works, Bureau of Streets and Mapping, as well as the Planning Department. The second criterion is whether the subdivision is inconsistent with the city's general plan. The appellant acknowledges in their brief that the newly created lots are going to be completely consistent in size with the typical lot size in this area. In fact, it's very much right in the middle of the pack. I think it's been stressed today already, but the subdivision approval does not approve the new development, and the Planning Commission will review. Planning Commission's review will include application of the residential design guidelines as well as any individual public comment to the actual subsequent development of these lots. And the other thing I'd mention about consistency with the general plan is that the appellant's suggestion that we only create 3 lots would in fact create larger lots in which are larger than the typical lot size in the area and would allow for houses even larger than that are currently proposed and larger than what the typical scale is in the neighborhood. The third criterion is whether the site is physically suitable for the type of or proposed density of the development. Again, the 4 new lots are consistent with the minimum lot size requirements of the Planning Code. They're consistent with the average lot size in the surrounding vicinity, again shown by the appellant's own filing, and will hold 1 dwelling unit each, which is permitted by the Planning Code. The fourth criterion, whether the subdivision is likely to cause substantial environmental damage or injure fish or wildlife or their habitat. Environmental review for this project has confirmed it is not a habitat for endangered, rare, or threatened species. The site is modest in size and is already surrounded by existing development. And the subdivision will be consistent with a typical urban infill development project in the city. The fifth criterion is whether the subdivision is likely to cause serious public health problems. Again, the subdivision will make way for a typical low-density housing development. In no way is expected to cause any serious public health problem. And in fact, the result of the project will also lead to more access to public open space. The project sponsor will be, at their own cost, constructing a public staircase and landscaping along the Paper Street, Carver Street next to the project site. So in fact, it'll lead to more access. The sixth criterion, whether the subdivision will conflict with public easements through the property. There are no public easements on the property, and again, the project will actually result in greater public access to Carver Street through the construction of those that staircase. So in short, the appellants provide no basis to overturn the subdivision under the State Map Act or the San Francisco Subdivision Code. What we have here is an appellant who is very clearly opposed to the development project, using the subdivision map appeal as a new venue to challenge the project. I would submit that this is not a precedent we want to set at this point. There's already a very robust approval process in place that this project is expected to go through. We are still working with the East Slope Design Review Board to come up with the final plans for the project. Our most recent correspondence with them was a letter from them saying that they were very happy with the progress we've made to date. So we're going to continue with that dialogue. Of course, the appellants will have the opportunity to file a DR and be in front of the Planning Commission. Again, the city's appropriate body for considering residential design guidelines and other issues in terms of neighborhood scale. The Board of Appeals will also have the opportunity to hear any building permit appeals. And of course, it's very possible that this project will be back in front of the Board of Supervisors on an appeal of the CEQA document after any project approval. So adding this new appeal process and engaging in this really doesn't serve any useful goals of the city, considering the fact that we already have a very robust review process, which is still to play out. So with that said, we respectfully request that the board deny this appeal, allow the development to proceed under the city's well-established procedures, and we're here if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I will open this item up to public comment for those who want to speak in support of the real party interests. And I'm sorry, ma'am, you spoke in favor, so you can't speak in support as well. Thank you. Are there any members of the public? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Now I will allow a rebuttal for up to 3 minutes from the appellant.
Thank you, President Breed. I will endeavor to stay within my 3 minutes. I found it, well, first, as a threshold matter, subdivision in this in Bernal is very unusual. In the 25 years I've lived there, I have never experienced a subdivision process before. All of the development was on already existing lots. I found it very interesting that the spokesperson from the planning department talked about our local process is essentially not to consider the general plan, not to consider the Bernal Heights Special Use District or the guidelines at this point, but to push all of that into the planning process. Well, unfortunately, the Subdivision Map Act, the state code, says no local agency shall approve a tentative map unless at that time there is a finding that it is consistent with the general plan. And the general plan is very, very specific. Let me get to my page here. 11.3, objective of the general plan. Accommodation of growth should be achieved without damaging existing residential neighborhood character. The city should continue to use a community planning process to direct growth and change according to a community-based vision. This is all being thrown out the window in our local process. I submit to you that that is illegal. It violates the state Subdivision Map Act, and we request again that you reject this tentative subdivision approval and that you send this back to the planning department and the developer to give us something that is consistent with the neighborhood character so that we can live as good neighbors going forward. This is going to be a blot on the neighborhood and a very bad precedent going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, item number 50 has been held and is now closed. Supervisor Avalos.
Thank you, President Breed. I meant to ask a question. It's related to the hearing
Yes,
about
that's fine.
any potential CEQA issues that might be related to this project.
Thank you, Supervisor Anne Marie Rogers, through the board president from the planning department staff. It's a good question. When we had written our response to the board, we said that the CEQA appeal window was open and a CEQA appeal may be filed. Since our appeal response was presented to you guys, that window has closed and there was no CEQA appeal that has been filed by any appellant. So our Class 32 CEQA exemption for the subdivision also was a CEQA review for the development proposals, which we do have in our office. So there will be no CEQA appeal before the board as none was filed.
And if you can clarify what type of review was done in terms of what was the ruling? It was negative deck, or
it's a Class 32 exemption for an infill development. So we went through all the standard CEQA requirements and criteria to ensure that it met that for an infill development, and it did. So looking at the entire built structure in addition to the subdivision. So in the future, if the project sponsor were to change the project significantly, say do a different number of buildings or something, we would then redo the CEQA. But as it is, there is no revised project, and we have completed CEQA, and the appeal window is over.
And a different number of buildings would mean less or more buildings?
I would rely on my CEQA planners to tell me. Generally, if it's a lesser impact, it would be still covered under the existing CEQA determination, but there might be some specific circumstances.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, I did have a chance to meet with the appellants in my office last week, and I really heard their concerns about just the change that this would make to the neighborhood, and there was a lot of alarm about the kind of density that this project would create. However, I did feel that what has been discussed in terms of there's still a possibility for a discretionary review before the Planning Commission, that there's still a lot of work being done on what the actual projects will look like. And just hearing from Ms. Rogers, and also knowing, as in our discussions with Mr. Givner as well, that if there was an attempt for the residents around the site on Bernal Heights Boulevard who wanted to go see if there was a possibility of going from 4 to 3 lots, there was a mechanism and a process for that as well. But hearing the Planning Commission, it does make sense that if we were to actually keep this at 4 lots, then that made sense, and it looks like the lot sizes do make sense to have 4 lots, that there's a lot of work to make sure that the buildings are not going to be massive within those lots. And that 4 lots also creates a possibility for smaller structures, that 3 lots would cause perhaps larger structures to be made. So it seems like smaller structures is what the community would want. If 3 lots were to move forward, then we'd see that that desire to see smaller structures perhaps would not necessarily go into effect through the planning process. And given that there's this other bite at the apple that I believe residents have, to me this doesn't seem like the right place to be actually making determination about the project. And I'm okay with the subdivision of 4 lots, for 1 lot into 4 for this project, knowing that we can go to 3 in the future. So I'd like to motion on this these items to not to approve the appeal. So it would be my motion would be to file item 50. Approve item 51 and tables items 52 and 53, thus not approving the appeal, but acknowledging to the residents who have a concern about changes in their neighborhood and this lot that there could be other process they have to engage with the developer to have something that they feel is going to work for the neighborhood.
Okay, Supervisor Avalos has made a motion to approve item 51 and table 52 and 53, seconded by Supervisor Yee. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Christensen.
Aye.
Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen. Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr. Aye. Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener. Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos.
Aye.
Avalos, aye. There are 10 ayes.
Okay, colleagues, the tentative map is finally affirmed. Madam Clerk, can we go back to roll call for introductions?
Next on roll call for introduction, Supervisor Cohen, new business.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Good afternoon, everyone. I have no legislation that I'm introducing today, but I wanted to take a moment and ask that the board consider closing this board meeting out in memory of a wonderful man. He was a giant in the Bayview community. He passed away a few months ago, and in his homegoing ceremony, the chief of police attended, as well as several other Bayview officers, and it was a beautiful community event, an opportunity from people from all different walks of life that had an opportunity to know Mr. Ben Robinson, to testify and share how he touched people's lives. And I count myself as one of those community members that was touched by Mr. Robinson. We called him Uncle Ben. Just to give you a brief background and profile about Ben, he was known as Uncle Ben to the community and to family and friends. He was known as Benny Robinson. He has long been noted to be the heart and soul of the Bayview Hunters Point community since 1946. He was known for his deep commitment to fulfilling the needs of his neighborhood and community with kind-hearted nature. Mr. Ben Robinson proudly served his country in the United States Army as a forward observer and combat infantryman in the all-black 349th Field Artillery Regiment from 1942 to 1945. It was during this time that he survived the sinking of his troops' transport ship, the SS President Coolidge, in 1942, and experienced some of the most horrific fighting in the Pacific during World War II. Mr. Robinson returned to San Francisco in 1945 after receiving an honorable discharge from the military. He married in 1947 and began to raise his family. He later attended John O'Connell Trade School, graduating with a specialty in mechanics and welding. Mr. Robinson worked tirelessly for decades in the Bayview Hunters Point community as a liaison to the community for his cement trucking company, and as an advocate for everyday residents in the community. Through his fierce dignity and unwavering dedication to his community, Mr. Robinson spent endless hours encouraging young men and women from the Bayview to take advantage of career and educational opportunities. In the year 2000, Mr. Robinson founded the Bayview chapter of the San Francisco Rotary Club, and this club chapter still exists and it's active today. The organization is dedicated to community service and to provide for those in need. The Bayview Rotary established a Ben Robinson Scholarship Fund in 2011. And I remember this was right around the time that I was sworn in as a new member of the Board of Supervisors and became very acquainted with Uncle Ben. This fund is in honor of his life's work to raise money for promising Bayview youth aspiring to their higher educational goals. So on an annual basis, we have an event in the springtime where we present young scholars from the community money from this fund. And while San Francisco mourns the loss of a civic-minded giant, we will forever honor the memory of Uncle Ben. His memory will live on through the young men and women that he worked so selflessly to uplift and move forward as the next leaders of our city and our nation. And with that said, Madam Clerk, I just want to recognize the family and community members that are here in the chamber who have come to celebrate Mr. Robinson's memory with us. Could you please stand? Thank you. Thank you for joining us. So I'd like to have a motion that we close out the entire board meeting in honor of Mr. Ben Robinson. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Cohen.
The rest I submit.
Thank you kindly. Supervisor Farrell.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Today, colleagues, I have one hearing request. I do believe at this point we can all agree that homelessness in our city of San Francisco has reached a state of not only crisis but emergency. We've seen decreases in the number of chronically homeless amongst our veterans, and but our overall homeless population has stagnated for many years. We have far too many families and children, which are now starting to be addressed specifically, seniors and other people suffering from mental illness living on our streets or in unstable situations that need our help. During a time when our local economy is growing and strong, I do believe we need to make the investments now in successful programs and services that are having the best outcomes. One of the models and programs we've seen great promise from recently is the Navigation Center that was launched a while ago in the Mission District. Early data and analysis from the Controller's Office on the effectiveness of the Navigation Center model are showing the successes and pitfalls of the model so that we can learn from them and adapt as needed. As I'm sure most of you are aware, the Navigation Center, however, is not permanent in its current location. The current site is slated for affordable housing development, and the center will close its doors at the end of June in 2016 when construction begins. Given that fact and the early promise of the existing Navigation Center, I wanted to host a hearing on the potential to expand the Navigation Center model to other locations across San Francisco. To date, the Controller's Office has released 3 reports. They provided an overview of the model itself and how it differs from our traditional homeless shelters here in San Francisco, with interviews from stakeholders and clients at the Navigation Center. A look at the impact the Navigation Center is having on encampment homelessness in San Francisco, and a look at how different city agencies and nonprofit partners are collaborating to better provide outcomes for those who go through the Navigation Center. And I want to thank Supervisor Board President Lennon Breed for her BLA request earlier today. Look forward to seeing those results as well, and how we're spending our money over the last few years around homelessness. The final reports from the Controller are slated to be released before the end of this month of December. And I want this conversation to be substantive, so I will plan on bringing the Mayor's Office of Hope, our Human Services Agency, and Department of Public Health, and our nonprofit partners to report for this hearing as well. Look forward to hosting this hearing in mid-January and to begin the discussion around the Navigation Center potential expansion early next year in front of when the existing Navigation Center will close, so we make sure that as a city we do not skip a beat and continue to promote projects and programs that provide the best results on our streets. The rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Farrell. Supervisor Kim. Okay. Supervisor Marr.
Thank you, colleagues. I have a couple of items, but first I wanted to say that this week is Alan Liu from the Youth Commission staff's last week as coordinator of community outreach and civic engagement. He unfortunately has jury duty this week. Alan was raised in San Francisco and grew up in the Excelsior and the Richmond district, and he graduated from Wallenberg High School and went on to finish his graduate degree in urban planning before joining the staff of the Youth Commission a couple years ago. During his tenure, I just wanted to acknowledge that Alan's been a really great asset to youth empowerment. He's worked with 4 groups of youth commissioners. He's invested in the civic leadership of dozens of young San Franciscans. He's staffed several key Youth Commission priority areas like Free Immunity for Youth, and thanks to Supervisor Campos and Power Casa Justa for leading that along with youth commissioners as well. He's also really empowered immigrant youth, undocumented youth with the DACA legislation, and thanks to Nicholas Persky and others too on that. But also parks access, that's equitable housing, justice issues for youth, transitional age youth issues, but I'll just say that he's done an incredible job. He also was one of the key point people with the Youth Commission on reauthorizing the Public Education Enrichment Fund and Children's Fund in the 2014 campaign as well. I just wanted to lastly say that Alan's brought a deep sense of mutual respect in working with young people, humility, equality, and policy insights in his work, and I wanted to thank him for his support of the Youth Commission staff. I also wanted to say he's going on to work as an educator and administrator with the Northern Cal School of the Baha'i National Center, and we wish him the best of luck. Today I'm introducing a hearing request on hunger and food insecurity. As you recall, 2 years ago, December, we passed a policy to drastically reduce or end hunger and food insecurity in San Francisco by 2020. It involved analyzing data from the Food Security Task Force and the Tenderloin Food Security Task Force that said 1/4 of San Franciscans, that's up to 225,000 people, are in danger of food insecurity. And during the holiday season, I think it becomes even more aware of how many people, lots of seniors and families that are going to bed hungry and at night or waking up in the morning not having enough to eat as well. So I think that the reports from the task forces really brought to light the real suffering that happens. But I know that our board resolution and our city is committed to developing plans and setting goals so that we're gradually reducing and dramatically reducing hunger in our city. In March of 2014, we held more hearings on each department's plans to advance progress in achieving the recommendations of the Ending Hunger by 2020 resolution. We also set out concrete city department steps to get us to the goal. So it's been 2 years, and this hearing would help us assess how far we've gone and how far we have to go. I also wanted to acknowledge that we've committed millions of dollars in the last several budgets. I wanted to thank the Budget Committee and colleagues for committing money for critical senior nutrition and health programs, but also significantly impacting hunger and food insecurity among youth as well. We're not over the finish line, and we have a lot of work to do. This hearing will allow the Food Security Task Force and our city departments to talk about how we're meeting the challenge of ending hunger by 2020 in our city. Also, I'm requesting a budget analyst report and a later hearing on San Francisco's culture of speeding and how to transition to a culture of safety. I know a number of my colleagues, Supervisor Yee, Kim, and Wiener, all attended with me as well Walk SF's moving memorial for traffic victims 2 weeks ago, where I'm really understanding how Walk SF is building a base, very diverse base of victims of traffic killings. And I think it was very moving to hear the stories during the march and the gathering along Market Street several weeks ago. Our Vision Zero committee will also be taking up issues of automated speed enforcement at the state level and how we support that at the local level. As people say, as Tom McGuire, the Sustainable Streets Director of the MTA, and others say, it's about enforcement, engineering, and education. But I think that reducing speeds and really looking at methods like automated speed enforcement is a great tool that we have. Speed reduction is a strategy not just for kind of citywide efforts, but in the Richmond District, we've reduced speeds on Fulton Street, for example. And I think this budget analyst request will look at how have we done in reduction of accidents and conflicts along different key streets that we've reduced speed, whether it's Fulton or Sunset Boulevard in Katie Tang's supervisorial district, District 4. Also, this past spring, Alfred Yee, the 87-year-old Richmond District resident, was struck by a car in the crosswalk, the first traffic killing of 2015 along a high-injury corridor. Also in the Richmond District, Rose Kelly, a senior, killed around the corner from my house as well on Cabrillo in the outer Richmond District. But I think these human stories were really brought out during the Walk SF Memorial. And my hope is that in the Richmond District, as we look at Safe Streets for Seniors and other programs, that we're also telling the human stories of the families and the losses and how we need to do everything we can to advance Vision Zero even more aggressively. So this budget analyst report will ask for an assessment or evaluation of speed reduction strategies in the city, reports on the recent traffic calming strategies, including reducing speeding and speed limits, updating on all streets where the city has recently reduced speed limits, including Fulton and Sunset Boulevard, examining the data on the strategy's effectiveness in slowing down traffic, preventing collisions, and improving pedestrian safety. And secondly, it will look at Safe Streets for Seniors strategies, reports and recommendations on street safety near where seniors congregate, such as libraries, parks, churches, and senior centers and care facilities. The report will study models and best practices from other jurisdictions, such as New York City's senior zones or Safe Streets for Senior areas along Chinatown and key places in Manhattan. This will develop best practices and models and recommendations on traffic calming measures that involve seniors and people with disabilities in the creation of safer streets as well. Another issue that's very important to me is developing a water access for all. Agua for all is the call in the Central Valley as low-income communities look at how to increase water fountains and drink tap stations in their communities. Last month, I introduced a hearing to get updates from our city, not just the Public Utilities Commission, but also the school district and the Rec and Park Department and other city departments on on achieving 100 new water fountains and drink tap stations by next year. We're almost there. We're up to 69, and coming up next week, I'll be working with Harlan Kelly from the PUC, our Department of Public Health, Roberto Ariel Vargas from the San Francisco Health Improvement Partnership and Communities to acknowledge that we're getting close to the 100 mark, but the 69th will be on Clement Street on 3rd and Clement, right by the parklet that we've created near the farmers market that the community has set up. As you know, access to water is a great strategy to curb obesity and type 2 diabetes by discouraging consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages, but also discouraging the use of plastic water bottles, which are such a harm to the environment as well. I always search for a fountain of youth in my life, and I think that water has been one of those ways, and if we have more access to it, people will lead healthier lives. And I think water fountains, the 100 that we will have by next year, are a fountain of youth that we need in every neighborhood as well. I also wanted to say that by advocating for a San Francisco Fountains of Youth campaign, we counter what big soda and the sugar-sweetened beverage industry that Supervisor Cohen and Wiener and Avalos and I have been dealing with, but we also counter the privatization of water that's going on around the world and in our communities as well. Having free, clean and fresh Hetch Hetchy water everywhere, especially in lower income parts of our city, is critical for new fountains of youth in our city. Next Tuesday morning, December 8th at 10 a.m., join us on Clement and 3rd Street or 3rd Avenue in the Richmond District. This new drink tap station will be, again, the 69th, as we're trying to advocate for 100 in our city by next year. But it's a collaboration of the school district, the Public Utilities Commission, and the Rec and Park Department that we've been working with for years. I also wanted to say that I was at the Beach LA soccer field today where 7 new water fountains, drink tap stations will be unveiled as the Beach LA fields are opened up in a short, I think it's 10 days. So there's many that are coming to the Richmond District and District 1, but also throughout the city. I wanted to thank Harlan Kelly from the Public Utilities Commission, Dr. Anish Patel of UCSF, and especially Roberto Ariel Vargas and grassroots communities that are uniting for water access, Agua for All, and San Francisco Fountains of Youth throughout our communities as well. One last plug before I kind of give the mic to the next colleague. On December 8th, coming up next week from 5 to 9 p.m., Clement Street merchants and Richmond District merchants are holding our Clement Time holiday stroll. There are about a dozen or more Richmond District businesses that will band together to create a really fun, family-oriented experience of holiday shopping and community gathering. There's going to be a whole bunch of discounts and promotions, and it'll be a way of gathering the community around Clement Street, a key destination spot for holiday shopping in our city. If you want more information, go to clementstreetsf.com. That's clementstreetsf.com. Thank you. The rest I'll submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Marr. Supervisor Tang.
Thank you. So, colleagues, I know that last week we had a pretty lengthy discussion about neighborhood preferences, especially as it comes to tenants who are evicted from where they currently reside. And I had mentioned last week that I was going to tack on to that legislation once it was passed, an amendment that is simple in nature, but I think very important, which is to require that the rent board, when providing notices to tenants who are going to be evicted from their units, that the rent board actually provide information about what resources, housing resources are there offered by the city's mayor's office of housing, in particular below market rate or other affordable housing programs that they may be eligible for. So I think that it's really important that as we are doing as much work as we can to strengthen our programs to allow for more affordable housing, especially for our tenants, that they actually know what is available and what they're eligible for. So, and then per our existing language access ordinance, these notifications will be provided in the various languages that are also spelled out in the LAO already. And secondly, I'm introducing a resolution today that really reflects some of the work of the Shelter Monitoring Committee. They had adopted a resolution at their last meeting to urge the Human Services Agency to amend their imminent danger policy that pertains to victims of domestic violence in the shelter system. And I do want to thank all of our female co-sponsors for this resolution. Of course, our male colleagues are welcome to join as well. So thank you, Supervisor Christensen, Cohen, Breed, and Kim. So previously, shelter residents who self-report or are involved in a domestic violence incident are denied shelter admittance or are not allowed to remain in a shelter for 30 days if they are in an imminent danger situation that might cause harm to themselves, shelter families, or shelter staff. I would like to note that recently, though, HSA, in working with the Shelter Monitoring Committee, did reduce this time frame to 15 days. So while this policy has been put into place out of concern for the protection of individuals at the shelter, it doesn't provide assistance to the potential victims of domestic violence who are actually in dire need of protection and services. And as we all know, domestic violence affects thousands of San Francisco residents and is one of the most chronically underreported crimes, and emergency shelters and transitional housing provide that critical support that they need during a domestic violence situation. In fiscal year 2013 to 14, city-funded emergency shelters provided 3,591 bed nights to women and children escaping domestic violence, and 3 transitional housing programs and 1 permanent supportive housing program provided 11,659 bed nights to women seeking longer-term stability. So in order to provide the best support and services to victims of domestic abuse, there needs to be a change in policy. So adopting the Shelter Monitoring Committee's recommendations would, most importantly, prohibit the denial of services based on being a victim of domestic violence or based on self-disclosure of domestic violence. And no victim of domestic violence should be turned away from shelter or services. Furthermore, we really do not want to discourage victims from actually reporting. So in addition, the changes would require lethality assessments upon intake to assess all families, establishment of procedures in which shelters contact law enforcement, updating shelter training manuals for shelter staff, consistency with the San Francisco shelter grievance policies, and we'd like to include these policies in all the contracts that are being renewed or established with shelter providers. And so, as we all know, victims of domestic violence are already facing difficult battles. And I really want to thank the Shelter Monitoring Committee members and domestic violence advocates for their dedicated work on this issue. One person in particular, Nicholas Kimura, he is part of the Shelter Monitoring Committee. He was really key in bringing a lot of these issues to our attention, I think actually when I was sitting on the GAO committee. And unfortunately, he will be leaving the Shelter Monitoring Committee very shortly. I think the end of this week is his last week. And so I'd just like to publicly thank him for everything he's done, as well as all the other members who contributed to this particular change we're pursuing with the HSA. So with that, I submit. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Tang. Supervisor Wiener.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Colleagues, today I'm introducing a recurring oversight hearing request for a quarterly hearing so that we can have full transparency on the city's enforcement efforts around short-term rentals. Prop F, of course, was a very contentious ballot measure this past November. And I think whatever one's view on Prop F, for those of us who are opposing it and those who are supporting it, we all want strong enforcement regarding short-term rentals. We know that there are short-term rentals occurring right now that are violating the law, that are causing problems in neighborhoods, that are really not in the spirit of the regulations that we passed late last year and then amended the middle of this year. We need to make sure that we are allowing those engaging in legal and appropriate short-term rentals to do so and to live their lives while cracking down on the short-term rentals that are violating the law. This summer, we passed legislation, as you will recall, creating the Office of Short-Term Rentals. We also significantly increased the enforcement resources provided to that office so that they can enforce the law consistently. We've seen what appears to be an increase in enforcement. I know in my district there are a number of properties where we believe that pretty significant violations of the law were occurring, and city staff stepped in, enforced, and imposed significant fines. It is important for the public to have confidence that enforcement is happening. A lot of times there is skepticism in San Francisco around enforcement efforts in various aspects of city government. When it comes to short-term rentals, given the importance of this issue to a lot of people on all sides of the issue, the public needs to know what level of enforcement is happening, and needs to know that people are being held accountable when they violate the law. So this hearing request seeks an oversight hearing to occur every 3 months. And at that hearing, the Office of Short-Term Rentals will come in and present information and statistics about enforcement activities, how much enforcement is happening, how the enforcement is happening, how many registrations are occurring of short-term rental properties, what kinds of penalties are being imposed, and what the trends are. So colleagues, I look forward to this quarterly hearing so that we can have full transparency on this important enforcement endeavor. I also have two very tragic in memoriam today. The first is for Christopher Mitchell. Mitch passed away suddenly on Saturday, November 21st. He resided in San Francisco and was an employee of Fitness SF, the gym. Known for his amazing smile and fierce wit, Mitch was an invaluable colleague and friend to all who knew him. A memorial will be held at SF Oasis the evening of December 11th, where friends can reflect and celebrate his life. The second in memoriam is for Dennis Nix, a longtime San Francisco resident, avid runner, diver, and skier who was killed in a hit-and-run this past weekend. Though he lived near Monterey Boulevard, he was woven into the Castro's social fabric, participating in local groups and often seen out and about in the neighborhood. A longtime San Francisco Frontrunners member and dear friend to so many people, Dennis was involved in many civic and social organizations here in the Bay Area and nationwide. Dennis reveled in his New York upbringing and held on to his distinctive Staten Island accent for all of his years here in San Francisco. His death comes as a shock for his family, for his friends, and he will be greatly missed. I also want to also acknowledge, as did Mayor Lee, that today is World AIDS Day, and to really reflect on the progress we've made in addressing this epidemic. When we look at the number of new infections in San Francisco last year, 302, which is lower than the year before and dramatically lower than even 10 or 15 years ago. We have been collapsing infection rates here in San Francisco. We've also been reducing the number of people in San Francisco who pass away from HIV. We have significantly expanded access to testing, access to all prevention tools, and access to medication, quick access to medication for people who become HIV positive. We really do see a light at the end of the tunnel in terms of, in the not so distant future, eliminating new HIV infections in San Francisco and eliminating deaths in San Francisco, and making sure that everyone living with HIV can do so in a healthy and productive way with the full support of our community. But we also need to recognize that many people continue to struggle with this virus. We have 2 million new infections around the world each year and 50,000 new infections in the U.S. And even here in San Francisco, there are people who struggle to access health care, who struggle with mental health and substance abuse issues that make it hard for them to stay healthy. And too many people living with HIV struggle with their housing. And so despite all of our strides and all of the victories that we've had with this epidemic, HIV is still, unfortunately, alive and well, and we need to recommit ourselves to ending this epidemic and to supporting everyone living with this virus. And the rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Weiner. Supervisor Yee.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Colleagues, today I'm calling for a hearing to assess the impact of coyotes in our neighborhoods and to discuss our city's response plan moving forward. Over the past several months, we have received dozens of calls reporting coyote sightings in our residential neighborhoods and around Stern Grove. Our office has worked with the Animal Care and Control, Rec and Park, and coyote experts to better understand the issues. Wild coyotes have been in and around many of our neighborhoods in the past, including in districts that represented by Supervisor Tang, Supervisor Weiner, Supervisor Farrell, I think even coyotes in your district, and Supervisors Christensen, and probably Supervisor Mars also. So it's nothing new. However, it seems like this year they're moving into some neighborhoods that never ever seen them before, and that's become an issue. There's really a lot of considerable concern for our household. I mean, basically what's happening is there's really some concerns with our dogs and our other pets, cats, and so forth. And there's, especially when 2 dogs were attacked recently by coyotes earlier this year at Stern Grove, several neighborhood associations have taken it upon themselves to conduct surveys and organize neighborhood meetings to better understand coyote behavior and to mitigate their impacts. Animal Care and Control and Rec and Park have also been proactive in conducting town hall meetings and offering more outreach, informing dog owners about coyotes. However, throughout the process, it has become clear that there is still a lot to learn about coyotes in our city and how we, as a local jurisdiction, can manage the impacts to ensure safety of our residents, pets, while preserving wildlife too. So I look forward to working with the departments and our neighbors on a citywide plan to see what we can actually do about this. The rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Yee. Supervisor Avalos.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Colleagues, with the world watching the Paris Climate Conference, we know that whatever happens, it most likely won't be sufficient to limit global warming to 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit or 2 degrees Celsius, as what was proposed in the Copenhagen conference. We also know that with gridlock in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, that cities like San Francisco must lead the way. We have a really strong climate action strategy in San Francisco, and we point out in that moving to 100% clean power is the single biggest step we can take to reduce our carbon emissions. And after years of delay, we are finally close to launching Clean Power SF this spring of 2016. So it's kind of disappointing to see that while the CEO of PG&E is jetting off to the conference in Paris, PG&E is looking at undermining our efforts to promote climate change or to prevent climate change with our Clean Power SF program in San Francisco. The California Public Utility Commission will be making 2 important decisions that will affect our Clean Power SF program's ability to compete with PG&E's energy. PG&E wants to increase the monthly exit fee they would charge Clean Power SF customers, and PG&E also wants to charge higher fees for rooftop solar customers and pay them less for excess power they generate. Allowing PG&E to unfairly increase the exit fee will hurt Clean Power SF's ability to compete with PG&E. Those fees would go to increasing PG&E's profits instead of enabling us to build new renewable power facilities. And PG&E's proposed changes to rooftop solar will discourage residents from installing solar panels, which both hurts our ability to generate clean power and cost San Francisco jobs. So today I'm introducing 2 resolutions opposing the increase in PG&E's exit fee on Clean Power SF customers and another opposing the increased fees for rooftop solar. Unfortunately, we saw in the November election that PG&E's employee union, IBEW Local 1245, is continuing to try to sabotage our Clean Power SF efforts. They put Prop G on the ballot in an attempt to hurt Clean Power SF's ability to compete with PG&E. And when we came to an agreement with them to support Prop H instead of Prop G, they spent $17,000 on a Change.org petition that claimed to be about supporting truly green local power and the family-sustaining jobs that come with it. And yet IBEW appears to be supporting PG&E's attempt to sabotage rooftop solar. The Coalition of California Utility Employees, which IBEW is a part of, has submitted comments in support of PG&E's proposal. If IBEW truly does support green local power, I hope they will speak in favor of these two resolutions. We will be scheduling a special joint hearing at LAFCO and the Public Safety and Neighborhood Services Committee on Friday, December 11th in order to vote on these resolutions before the California Public Utility Commission takes action later this month. And I want to thank the co-sponsors on the resolution related to the exit fee, which include every member of the Board of Supervisors, and on the net metering fee. I had not had the chance to talk with all of you colleagues about it, but I do want to thank co-sponsors Breed, Campos, and Marr for co-sponsoring the net metering resolution that will be before LAFCO and GAO later this month. And the rest I'll submit. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Avalos. Madam President, that concludes the introduction of new business.
Okay, Madam Clerk, can you please read public comment?
At this time, the public may now address the entire Board of Supervisors for up to 2 minutes on items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Board, to include the minutes and items on the adoption without reference to committee calendar. Public comment is not allowed when an item has been previously subject to public comment at a board committee. Pursuant to the board's rules, direct your remarks to the board as a whole, not to individual supervisors and nor to the audience. Speakers using translation assistance will be allowed twice the amount of time to testify. If you would like to display your document on the overhead projector, please clearly state such to SFG TV and remove the document when you would like the screen to return to live coverage of the meeting.
All right, first speaker, please.
And could I get the overhead, please, for my timely talk here? Thank you, President Breed and other members of the cabal. My name is Christopher Dahl, and I live at 6th and Howard, 10 blocks and less than 14 meters from sea level. I rise to comment on free energy. Free energy is the foundation of a new plan to bring humanity back into carbon balance with the world. We can use free energy to make fresh water to grow new trees. The new trees are the natural systems which will remove excess CO2 from the atmosphere and restore missing O2 and pull us back from the brink of a billion-year catastrophe. Our billion-year catastrophe which will destroy our 5,000-year civilization. The fresh water will be extracted from our salty oceans using desalination systems which are becoming ever more efficient, and these desalination systems will be powered by free energy. Free energy is free for the cost of the harvesting equipment. Free energy is free of all carbon upload. Free energy is free of waiting for the sun to rise or the wind to shift or the tide to change. Free energy is available to everyone. It is available to anyone, anywhere. And could I have the overhead, please? Thank you. It is available to anyone, anywhere, except that it's just a few miles straight down. Geothermal energy is free energy, and this free energy is freely available at what are called hydrothermal vents, like this one. Water, superheated over 600 degrees Fahrenheit, is forced into the ocean, and its internal heat will force the water towards the surface. This kinetic impulse can push turbine blades to generate electricity, and in addition, there are ways to pull electricity directly from heat. However accomplished, free energy will provide a safety net for our civilization. Thank you, President Breed.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
for 2 years I am coming here since I'm homeless. United States is fascist country. Of course, and I call you supervisor fascist because you are working for them. Supervisor Christopher is lucky. Maybe it's her last time that she's listened that she is fascist. Yes, you know, you have millions of people on the street. It's not people, it's animals. They're eating from the garbage can, they drink from garbage can, they never saw doctors. They're not people. They are coyote maybe change face. And you are listening to me for 2 years, and no one of you tried to help me to ask, what can I do for you? 85 years old Jew who survived World War II, who survived Holocaust, but couldn't maybe survive homeless in San Francisco. Interesting, right? He should to ask people who came to me in Russia and say, go, Jew will help you change your life in United States, not like in Russia, with very exist anti-Semitism. But here is for me exist dead on the street. God punish you, you and your family. What do you do to people?
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Of universal missionary objective, awakening of oneself and awakening of others until the complete perfection of awakening for everyone. From loss, mental loss, personal cultivation loss. Bravo of the introductions today. To offer a helping hand for the people in their day of difficulties and dead end. Turn on the worldly dangers, everything, back to security forever, foreverness. And provide provision, education, life support, love, mercy for the needed. One is to uprise from being just a physical entity of hallucination onto kings of the world by applying heavenly virtues of working on holy studies with cultivation of sitting meditation to nourish one's soul, self, and mercy of having divinity force to control emotion and intuition. Worldly rescue works on this idea of the initial self-rescue for the 5 major Almighty God, our ancestor, ultimate holy, he who firstly delivered of Taoism, Confucianism, Buddhism, Catholic Christianity, and Islamic Muslims in terms of recovery to the ultimate principle, then we can work on rescue for the worldly people of true focus in concern with meditation and mercy. True self, having holy qualities, utilizes holy study and holy cultivation, leading on to heavenly destiny of missionary for holy management for the people are the realistic works of King's way of holiness.
Thank you very much. Your time is up, Mr. Yip. Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Jackie, and I'm a lifelong educator. I didn't know I was going to be waiting 4 hours to make a little tiny speech. I would hope that you maybe change your public comment toward the beginning so that, anyway. Good evening, everyone. President and Board of Supervisors of San Francisco. After the vicious attack on the Planned Parenthood clinic in Colorado Springs, I'm appealing to you to disallow the Saturday, January 23rd, 2016 March for Life in San Francisco. Allowing this march would be like allowing the KKK to come after the Charleston massacre and to march through the streets. The anti-choice people want to take women back to the Middle Ages, and they are the kind of people to uphold and call for violence against the legal abortion providers of this country. This is hate speech. It's not free speech. Women have the right to be liberated from these backward ideas. Women have the legal right to choose their own health providers when it comes to our own bodies. How can the so-called progressive San Francisco government, year after year, allow these 50,000 women haters to march through San Francisco's Market Street against our rights? I say no more ignorance, no more lawbreakers. Women, take back the streets. Please don't let them come here this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Supervisors. Beverly Upton, San Francisco Domestic Violence Consortium. I'm so happy to be with you all tonight. I'm here for two things. One is that we want to show our full and complete support for Supervisor Katie Tang's resolution around the imminent danger policy in the homeless shelters and its effect on families who experience domestic violence. And there couldn't be a more poetic time to do it as the mercury falls and the holidays are near us. I don't think any of us would be able to sleep thinking that the domestic violence shelters could be full, our 77 beds could be full on a Friday or Saturday night, and somebody could face being put out with their children in the cold this close to the holidays or any other time. So I want to thank Supervisor Tang for her leadership and her team, Deanna and everybody who's worked on this. I'm just very pleased and honored. Thank you. And it really brings me to my second reason for being here. We've really learned to live with this policy over the years. We've learned to cut corners, and we've learned to hide families, and we've learned to do all kinds of stuff because of this policy. And I have to say, we got complacent. We've let this policy stand for years. And this young activist, Nick Kimura, and I wish he were here, asked me a year or two ago, is this okay with you guys, And we said, no, of course not. And he was like, I have the energy and I can do this and I want to make this change. And so we've just been working with him shoulder to shoulder and his team and the Shelter Monitoring Committee. And it's really been an experience of having some real help, somebody that would really climb in the boat with these families and really push this from a different perspective. And so I want to join the supervisors and especially Supervisor Katie Tang in honoring and thanking Nick Kimura today. Our loss, San Francisco's loss and New York's gain, he's leaving tomorrow or the next day, but what a powerhouse. Integrity, energy, leadership. That's what we need. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Tom Gilberti. Last week, I learned something, slapdash versus common courtesy, slapdash versus respective civility, slapdash versus valuing a citizen democracy. The difference is 1 minute, that 1 minute between 2 minutes and 3 minutes. I would love for it to, I hope that somewhere in the distance we can get that 3 minutes here, uncensored. And I say that with the memory of being saved by the bell. 27 years ago, within a month of my being paralyzed, I was roller skating at Joe DiMaggio Park. My last date before I was paralyzed was at the North Beach pool. Any attention that goes in that area is well appreciated. My 5 points of housing incorporates on a grand scale preferential housing. Appreciated. Learning something else. There seems to be a pattern that comes here. Communities come, it's hard to get communities rolling, and they come here en masse to say, hey, housing, this element, we're not in favor of this. Valencia and the Marsh, They came. Save Our Mission came. 706 Mission, the Tower High Rise, they came. Soma Filipina came. 75 Howard came. Tonight, Bernal Heights came. Everybody gets shut down. And we have a housing policy that 88% of the people of San Francisco can't afford. And there needs to be a better process. We have to expect that crowds come late. And they keep losing the appeal here, 0 for 5. We need a little bit more step up here at the Board of Supervisors. We need a halt. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Sylvia Johnson, and I think that these outcomes in mathematics should be higher, and that they should be at 44% in in our housing situation that where we need to build in all of our perspective and our landlords for horses and every economy that we have in our housing authorities, that our safety bills, which are written a long time ago, it has perspectives, and the areas that I had put where everybody was in peace, and that they have it already in the police department. So I don't know why these advantages have been, more, especially. Of course, I'll write out some more for safety issues and where we need to put our cars and our BART contracts, which are all in my elements. Let's put for contracting and measurements for our individualities and schooling to our mathematics and our same projects and our percentage, which need to be the 3, 4, 7 project messages, which we need to put all these degrees in our housing so we can see a better point in our view, in our center of our mind, where we can expand our abilities to be better leaders in our high prices and major that you see in these building processes, that it will be, 77.5%.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Members of the Board of Supervisors, Ray Hartz, Director, San Francisco Open Government. Earlier this year, I filed an immediate disclosure request with the Office of Board President London Breed. I notified her office of this request by telephone. I appeared before this Board of Supervisors and gave public notice on 3 separate occasions. I filed a complaint with the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force. There was a hearing before the task force. So I would say a person would have to be dumber than a box of rocks to believe that she didn't know of this lawful request. Throughout the process, the supervisor failed to respond in any manner. She did this both knowingly and willfully, despite her understanding of her obligations under both the Sunshine Ordinance and the California Public Records Act. Overhead, please. I publicly accuse Board Supervisor London Breed of malfeasance in office. A public official who blatantly disregards their obligations under the law in carrying out their duties is not fit to serve. Certainly not fit to serve as your board president. My sincere hope is that when Aaron Peskin returns to this chamber, whether it's next week or the week after, that one of the first things or the earliest opportunity, you remove President Breed from the presidency of this board. She sets a bad example, which Supervisor Farrell has passed. He's been found in violation of this ordinance twice in respect to my public records request. I concur with Supervisor Wiener's comments that many of the citizens of this city have a lack of faith in the enforcement of law. And as far as open government goes, both the Sunshine Ordinance, this board has done nothing but undermine the ability of the Sunshine Ordinance to be enforced and has blatantly violated it with total disregard to the rights of the public. If I were a rich
Thank you.
person,
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to provide public comment at this time? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Madam Clerk, can we go to our next items, please?
Items 64 through 69 are being considered for immediate adoption without committee reference. A single roll call vote may enact these items. A member may object, sever an item, and have it considered separately.
Okay, seeing no names on the roster, Madam Clerk.
Madam President, my apologies. Item 66. I have a couple of cleanup amendments to make to it.
Okay.
My apologies.
So we will remove item 66, and can you please call the roll on the rest of the items?
On items 64, 65, 67, 68, 69, Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos?
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Christensen? Christensen, aye. Supervisor Cohen?
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell?
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim?
Aye.
Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr? Marr, aye. Supervisor Tang?
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener? Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee?
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos? Avalos, aye. There are 11 ayes.
Okay, those motions and resolutions are adopted unanimously. All right, Madam Clerk, please call item 66.
Item 66 is the motion to establish the 2016 Board of Supervisors regular meeting schedule. And I have a couple of cleanup items that the clerk is handing out now. I'll just briefly mention there are about 4 of them. On page 1, line 5, to strike March 29th. On page 6, at the end of that sentence, add the word spring. On line 7, add March 28th through April 1st. And on the second page, striking lines 8 through 10, it's a duplicative paragraph.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Colleagues, is there a motion to approve those amendments to item 66, moved by Supervisor Cohen, seconded by Supervisor Farrell? Colleagues, can we take the amendment without objection? Without objection, the amendment passes. And colleagues, on the item as amended, can we take this same house, same call? Without objection, item 66, the motion... Item 66 passes as amended unanimously.
Thank you.
All right. Madam Clerk, can you please go to our imperative item and please read the item?
Yes. On behalf of President Breed and Supervisor Tang, we have a resolution commending Supervisor Julie Christensen.
And Supervisor Farrell, sorry.
And Supervisor Farrell. A resolution commending Supervisor Julie Christensen for over 20 years of dedicated service to the City and County of San Francisco.
Okay, colleagues, we have an imperative item which requires the board to adopt 2 separate findings by a 2/3 vote before unanimous adoption of the actual item. So this is purely commendatory, and it also needs also the action came at the attention of the board after the agenda was posted. So is there a motion to approve those 2 particular items? Motioned by Supervisor Farrell, seconded by Supervisor Tang. So without objection, we will approve.
Public comment, Madam.
Oh, for the findings?
My apologies. No, you're correct. Please proceed.
Okay. So without objection, we will approve the findings unanimously. And on the actual item, I will open that item up to public comment. Are there any members of the public who'd like to comment on the imperative item only?
Hello, this is Sylvia Johnson, and the impairment items that I've already had put some papers in on the major equipment that it makes a lot of sense for our new world. That's
Ma'am, you have to comment on the specific item of commending Supervisor Christensen specifically.
Well, Christensen is a really good officer, supervisor, and I really like him. And he has a lot of, outlines where there are differences and, that are put in measurements so that we can have, coordination. But I think that we need to bring this to another different supervisors, to gain on some of our new continents that we have, that are better organizations. And all the supervisors here are already written on, pages that I had approved, in our languages which we have never, been, in our area that we need to see, which goes far advanced for love and protections for safety issues. And I really been working hard on a lot of these issues that I have already put in to make advances for our wheelchair and our homeless and the poor, for our building processes. We need to see a little better, eye view that we have not seeked, in our measurements to outstand our affections.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Tom Ghiberti, I would have saved some seconds on my first 2 minutes if I'd known we would have gotten this one. In my heart, the North Beach Pool and Playground occupies a big place in my heart, and I'm hoping that for other generations that they can appreciate it too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public who'd like to comment on this item at this time? Seeing none, public comment is closed. And colleagues, can we take this imperative, somebody's missing, there we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Can we take this imperative item, same house, same call? Without objection, the item passes unanimously. And Madam Clerk, can you please read the in memoriams?
Yes, today's meeting will be adjourned in memory of the following beloved individuals. On behalf of Supervisor Wiener, for the late Mr. Christopher Mitchell and Mr. Dennis Nix. On behalf of President Breed, for the late Mrs. Estelle Crawford. And on behalf of Supervisor Cohen, for the late Mr. Ben Robinson.
Okay, Madam Clerk, is there any further business before us today?
That concludes our business for today.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We are adjourned.